Tuesday, June 9th. Welcome to the Carson City School Board meeting. The first item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda.
Second.
So we have a motion by Dawn, second by Laurel. Any discussion? Seeing none, any public comment?
Seeing none.
Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is the flag salute. Lupe, will you lead us in the salute?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Lupe. Next item on the agenda is the superintendent's report. This is for information only. Mr. Stokes.
Thank you, President Walker, members of the board. It's good to be with you this evening. I thought I would start my report by giving you just a little briefing. We have received a few items from the governor's office. I tried to send a copy of that out to members of our reopening committee, also to the trustees, and also to our principals. There's a significant number of documents that are part of that email. All of them are aimed at trying to organize ourselves in such a way that we're able to reopen school according to the guidance provided in those documents. I guess to try to move forward on this, I'm a little disappointed in that there's not more information, especially as it may apply to future times. So in essence, we're taking things that we know today and we're trying to project that information to a school opening in August. And I think we've all seen that conditions can change, conditions will change. However, we can really only build on what we know today. So I wanted to let the board know that we have that guidance. I am working through that in greater detail. We will be using that information with our reopening committees. Both of those committees are operational now. We have an operational committee that is made up of supervisors within the school district representing custodial, maintenance and grounds, transportation, nutrition services, health and safety. So indeed, the operational aspect of the school district and what might have to be in place, like personal protective equipment and whether or not we'll be needing to manage our facilities in a different way. For example, what do you do if you have a sick child or a sick staff member? Are we equipped to manage those kinds of conditions in the schools? So truly, just about every aspect of our operations is being impacted and will take some modification. We also met for the first time on Monday, yesterday, with our instructional committee and have a great group of folks there. And we're adding to that group to make sure that we're covering the details and the individual student groups that may need that representation. There's a variety of things that we're looking at, and just kind of wanted to let you know that those committees are up and running, and we'll give a more detailed report on that as we have more information. The next part of my presentation, I'd like to introduce Mr. Bob Chambers and have him join me here at the table. As you know, Mr. Gavin Ward has taken a position with Douglas County School District, leaving his position of principal at Carson High School vacant. We're glad to have had some highly qualified individuals who applied for the position. And at the end of the day, Mr. Chambers, who is a longtime teacher and administrator here in the district, rose to the top of our list. Our selection committee was made up of 8 members. I'd like to thank Trustee Crossman. She helped us out. She represented the board. We had members of my team. We had members of the school staff and other representatives of the employee groups present for our interview. Mr. Chambers has a nice cross-section of experience. Just to name a few, he's been a secondary English teacher. He has worked as vice principal at the elementary level and has worked as a dean and a vice principal at the high school level. And in each of these administrative roles, he's worked with students, he's worked with parents, he's worked with staff. He has worked through the evaluation process with certified and classified staff. It really does come with the whole package. And so I think in addition to that, Mr. Chambers has the personality, the common sense, and the wisdom and judgment that it comes to running a big high school. And so we're happy to be able to have him sitting here before you today and recognize him as our new principal. Now, because of our social distancing conditions, we weren't able to bring his family in tonight. We'll do that at another time. I'm sure you know that Mandy, his wife, also works for the school district and, of course, has some other people who live with him that we're proud of and are happy that they join our student ranks. So with that, I'm happy to...
Mr. Stokes, and I'm sure his boys are really sad to miss a school board meeting.
Well, I heard that Mr. Chambers was going to force them to dress up a little bit, and anyway, another night, we'll wait for that. So I'd like to offer the microphone to Mr. Chambers, and certainly an opportunity for you folks to ask him a few questions if you'd like.
All right. President Walker, trustees. Bob Chambers, I've worked in Carson City School District for the last 21 years. As Mr. Stokes said, I was an English teacher. I taught from regular English to honors English, went into administration, vice principal at Empire Elementary. I spent 3 years there as their VP, and then came back to the high school as a dean of students. I was a dean of students for 5 years. I've been a VP at the high school now for 5 years. And it is crazy for me to think that I've been working in this school district for 21 years. Glenn Adair hired me, and after the interview process and got the job and everything, he said, "Now, Bob, at the end of the school year, I'm going to cut you, and you better bleed blue." And that's kind of the guy he was, and that just always stuck with me. And that's Carson High School for me, and that's being a transplant from Montana. Carson High School has always been my second family. So I'm extraordinarily honored to be their principal and to be at Carson High School. Couple of things. One, my boys were both in shorts and their hair was all like this, and they honestly looked at me and said, "Are we coming?" No. And I blamed you, Renee. I said, "Renee said you can't come." And Mandy was doing a Zoom meeting, so she couldn't be here anyway. So there was that. Number two, this afternoon I was talking to Gavin, and I said, "So, what's it like?" He goes, "Oh, no, just, no big deal. I'll talk." I go, "Will they ask questions?" "No, they won't ask you any questions." Like, "Oh, okay, great." And then Tasha's like, "They're totally going to ask you questions." Awesome. Thanks, Gavin. So, Oh, I know, so like, oh, so you're highly unprepared for this. Okay, yeah, we have some questions for you. But with that, I want you to know that um, I consider Carson City my home. I'm raising my family here. I want my boys to have the opportunity to, live and grow in this town. And if they need to go somewhere else, I guess they need to go somewhere else, but I'd really like to keep them here and have those opportunities here for them. So with that, fire away. Laurel was on the panel.
Well, Bob, I'll just say, my years at Fritch, I never quite competed with your son's favorite vice principal, and he told me daily, but his dad did. So, but really, it's been nice seeing you kind of go up through the ranks, and I know you have a lot of support at the high school. Like, I personally had a lot of people contacting me and kind of selling you, and I had to keep saying, well, I don't make that decision. They will have a panel, and I won't probably be part of that process, but you have a lot of people believing in you. I think you're going to do a great job, and we're happy to have you as the principal of Carson High School.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. With that, we have an amazing staff, and that was a huge portion of knowing what next year holds and maybe even a year after that, and just having the confidence in the staff and the students that you have the team that can do that. So that was a huge part of it. And my wife agreeing to go to Carson Middle School, maybe. That was the other part.
And I'd just like to say that you've had some great leaders in the past.
Absolutely.
And we still have a few on staff that you can ask questions, and please feel free to use those resources. They're very valuable. And we all know how Glenn Adair was, so you got baptized by fire, if nothing else. And if anything shows on Saturday's graduation, you're going to be great. And we're just glad to have you and that you're still here. And your wife is amazing. She saved my stepson from not graduating, so that's always a plus.
And I think that graduation is a testament to the staff, because that wasn't administration, that was staff. That was, Ann Britton and Anna Campbell got together and figured out how to do that and make that happen for the students. And those are the people I work with every day, and that's really special.
Well,
Yeah,
you're
Bob,
also taking over for Gavin, and I'm sure things haven't changed. Carson Middle School, that man didn't walk anywhere. So I'm sure the staff is wondering, are you going to run as much as Gavin ran?
I get out and about.
Joe, did you have
Yeah,
something
Bob.
to add?
Yeah, thanks. This is Joe. I just wanted to congratulate Mr. Chambers. All my dealings with Bob are always positive. The students I meet seem to like him. And when you're in a high school setting, that's important, having that relationship with the students. So congratulations on being our principal for the high school. I think you're going to do a great job there. And yeah, I'm sorry your wife couldn't be here tonight as well. I was actually on that Zoom call with her and the Jumpstart parents, and then I cut out to come here, and it was still going on. But no, we're happy to have you. So, thanks for stepping up and assuming the role of principal.
Thank you, Mr. Cassiopo.
Yeah, I'd just like to congratulate you on your selection as the principal. I think you're going to do a great job, and looking forward to working with you. And best of luck.
Thank you.
I also want to congratulate you. I look forward to seeing the good things that you're going to do at Carson High for our kids. So congratulations.
I appreciate it. Absolutely.
See, you're being too easy on them.
Oh, no, I understand. I have a feeling that you will definitely make me sweat. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. That's all I have tonight.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is board reports. This is for information only, and we'll start with Don.
Yeah, just real quick, I had the honor of taking part in the Eagle Valley Middle School promotion ceremony this past Thursday. And I want to just congratulate Dr. Conley and his staff for creating a very positive, fun experience for the students. It was just a nice time and kind of a get away from all the world for maybe an hour or so. So just wanted to thank them. That's all I have.
Thank you. Stacy?
Just to reiterate, thanking both Pioneer High and Carson High for their creative ways to make graduation special for this class of 2020. And it was amazing to drive down William Street and see all the graduates for Pioneer High. I think that's really a classy tradition and maybe one that we can keep going with in the next couple years too. And then just on the NIAA, they sent out a Phase 2 memo today, which I have emailed Renee, but it came out at 6 o'clock. So I have it so that you guys will forward it from Renee so you guys can see it because it's about 9 pages. But it basically talks about that we can start doing the practices and the events according to the NIAA rules, except that they will be closed to public attendance and they require you to wear a face mask. We'll see how that works with some of those sports. So that just came out today, so I wanted to let you know that.
Thank you. Lupe?
I just want to thank the high school administration for the amazing job they did with the graduation celebration. I heard nothing but the best from the parents and from the students, so it was a wonderful event.
Laurel?
I'm just also going to thank the high school, Mr. Ward, Mr. Chambers, Mrs. Campbell Richards, who did an awful lot of work, and all the staff that were there Saturday were volunteering time. And I've heard very positive things from parents, families, students. I did ask specifically students if they would prefer that because there's been a lot of parents saying, this is how every graduation should be. And the students that I talked to said, well, we didn't have the other one, so we're not sure what we like, what we can compare it to, but they really liked what they did have. So I think that that's a win. And it's something to keep in mind for the future too, so.
Thank you. Richard?
Yeah, I'm just going to ditto what the two people before me spoke of, Laurel and Lupe. I thought the graduation went very well. I think the kids enjoyed it. I know I enjoyed being part of it. And I just wanted to wish the class of 2020 the best of luck in the future and thank all the staff that was involved in putting that together. I think they did a terrific job.
Thank you. Joe?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I'll ditto everybody on the high school graduation. I thought it was a success. It was, uncharted territory like most of the semester was, but it went well. And I'd like to thank, in addition to teachers and staff, the students and the parents. It was, I thought everything flowed really well. People were respectful. They were happy. I know when Laurel and I were on stage, I'm sure she heard it too. We heard a lot of parents yelling out, "Thank you so much." And so, it made everybody feel good. It was, it was a good day. It was, as I said, a very uncommon semester, but I guess the one common thing that occurred during graduation was the Carson wind. And, other than a couple of tablecloths flying around, it went pretty well. So at least wind stayed
That's
normal.
'cause
You
missed
missed
that.
the porta potties, Joe, that went flying later in
I
the
know, I
afternoon.
left.
And
See
the
what
diploma
happens?
holder.
One
There we go.
couple of things I wanted to mention aside from graduation was, as I alluded to, I just got off a different Zoom meeting with the Jumpstart parents. Mrs. Chambers led that, and we have students that are trying to figure out if they're going to go Jumpstart or a different route. So it was a nice bit of information presented to everybody, and then Mrs. Chambers opened it up for questions and was able to answer all the questions that the parents and students had. So I'm excited for the students as they decide what direction they want to go. And last but not least, even though we had scholarship night, I just want to remind students that scholarships is kind of an all-year thing. So if you're interested in scholarships, there's still avenues you can pursue to apply for scholarships that could help you out in your post-high school career, at least academic career, and that includes my report.
Thank you, Joe. So I guess with mine, I'll say that it is a election day, and you know, one of the keys of a democracy, I don't know what's wrong with me tonight, is everybody votes. So hopefully everybody took the time to vote, and I wish the present board members on the ballot good luck tonight, which I think Laurel and I have it easy this evening. Stacy, we're sending you all the luck in the world, so good luck. Also, I missed the Carson High graduation, and I was so looking forward to this. This was the last group of kiddos I actually taught in Carson City, so I was in a self-quarantine this weekend while I waited on a test result. So the good news is it was negative, and I watched as much as I could on Facebook and the internet, and I was there in spirit. So thank you all for representing so well, and Gavin and his staff for doing such a great job for these families. I know that there were a lot of people worried about graduation, and it looks like we pulled it off. And I think that even Pioneer, I saw at, what's the casino down by Costco? Bodine's had Pioneer seniors on there, and I think I saw by Slot World some Carson High graduates. And so I thought that we really went above and beyond to recognize these kids who didn't quite get all the traditional trappings we get with our senior year of high school. So nice job, Carson City and Carson High School. I think that was great. Another thing that is a little bit different this year is this would be the meeting where we would be honoring our retirees who have given us at least 10 years of service. And so Mr. Stokes and I discussed at least entering their name into the record. We obviously can't have this many people in the room yet. And so if you'll indulge me, I'm just going to share some of our retirees who have given us 10 years of service or more. From Carson High School, Joseph Billings, science teacher. Robin Blues, accounts clerk 4. Stephen Charles. Randall George. Michael Malley. Marissa Morrow. Patricia Quinn Davis. Cynthia Reyes. Gavin Ward. And William Zabelski. From Pioneer High School, Phyllis Atkinson. From Eagle Valley Middle School, Joanne Pitlock. From Bordewick Bray Elementary School, Kathleen Childs. Mary Hammerstadt. Linda Herzl. Barb Martin. Dwayne Souza. From Empire Elementary School, Hazel Ellington. Robin Link. Martha Samples. From Fremont Elementary School, Jacqueline Gavuzzi. Carl Seberg. From Fritch Elementary School, Corinne Callahan. Mark Twain Elementary School, Deanna Fine and Susan Zink. From Seeliger Elementary School, Susan Henry, Karen Reeder Gould, Jill Still. From Operations Services, Wayne Schlachta. From Transportation Department, Dolores Helton, Mitchell Jepson. And so obviously, just reading your names doesn't do justice all the time and commitment you've given our school district, but we value everything you've done, and thank you, and we hope your retirement is bright and something that we all envy as we continue to work. So congratulations and job well done. So with that, we'll move on to association reports. This is for discussion only. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to public comment. And I'm just going to read our disclaimer. Comments will be accepted through telephonic participation or through virtual participation via email at publiccomment@carson.k12.nv.us. Comments may be made by members of the public on any matter within the authority of this board. Please note that public comments will be taken on items marked for possible action before action is taken on such items, and members of the public are encouraged to comment on such items at the time they are being considered. Although members of the board may respond to questions and discuss issues raised during public comment, no action may be taken on such matter until a matter is placed on the agenda for action at a meeting of the board. In making public comment, Speakers are asked to identify themselves for the record. Speakers are further asked to refrain from speaking over each other if participating by telephone. Speakers are asked to limit their comments to no more than 3 minutes, whether in writing or oral, and not to simply repeat comments made by others. This is for discussion only.
Seeing no public comment?
Okay. Moving on, item number 7, discussion and possible action to consider the potential sale of a portion of the district property located north of the Professional Development Center at 604 West Musser Street, consisting of approximately 17,500 square feet to the owner of 701 West Telegraph Street, represented by Nevada Premier Commercial Real Estate. This is for possible action. Mr. Stokes, Keith Howell, and Rob Joyner will be leading the discussion.
Thank you, President Walker and members of the board. Both Mr. Howell and Mr. Joyner are here tonight, and I'll vacate my seat here after a brief introduction so they can come to the table and answer any questions that you might have. But as you may recall, I believe it was in our first board meeting of March, both Mr. Joyner and Mr. Howell were here, and they had contacted me even before that meeting to ask whether or not the board might consider selling a portion of the property that we all know as 604 West Musser, which is also our professional development building, the old Martha Glisa building. And as you know, the back portion of that property is right now doesn't have any building on it. And so the question was asked whether or not the trustees might be interested in selling that piece of ground. And so knowing that that was not a decision that I could make on my own, we brought that information to you. And we did not take any action at that meeting in March. And so as Mr. Joyner and Mr. Howell contacted me again saying, you know, we'd like to just bring some closure to this question. And so they're here tonight again to answer any question that you might have. But essentially what's up before you is to consider whether or not it's in the district's best interest to hang on to that property or to sell it. And so if you have any questions of me, I'd be happy to answer those. Otherwise, I'll turn the microphones over to Mr. Joyner and Mr. Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Stokes.
Good evening, President Walker, board members. Rob Joyner for the record. I want to thank Mr. Stokes for all of his professional courtesies and assistance. Also, Renee Cortez has been wonderful, as you probably all know, in assisting us in bringing this to you. As Mr. Stokes said, on March 10th, we were here. Another election day. That was caucus day for the Democrats. And we were fighting the crowds to get here then, but now they've moved the election only one location tonight over at the courthouse, so we're safe. We got a good parking space. Again, we are representing the owner, the Fant Family Trust that owns the apartment complex, 36 units on Telegraph. And Mr. Fant would like to improve that property dramatically, really, and also would utilize your property if you were inclined to sell it. It's about 17,000, maybe 17,500 square feet, roughly. It hasn't been utilized, as you know, for many, many years, if ever. And as we discussed with you on March 10th, there was some discussion about an easement for emergency access from Elizabeth back to, or from Musser back to Telegraph on the east side, not the Elizabeth Street side. And we could certainly accommodate that. We know you have a lot of things that have happened in your budgeting process since we met with you on March 10th. We hope this might help in a small way. You do have mandatory budget reductions coming down from the state. You have a recovery committee that's looking at things like this. We don't want to even guess what the value might be, but if you were inclined, we could take the next step, which would be to do some due diligence, get some assessments to establish fair market value, and we could offer you a letter of intent with the intentions of Mr. Fant and his family, what they would do, and the contingencies they would need to get some approvals from the city before they would be in a position to accept that for their uses. So, Mr. Howell, do you have any things to add?
Keith Howell, Nevada Premier Commercial. I don't per se have anything. We've been managing that property now for about 5 years. It has gone through an ownership change recently where Mr. Fant has retained ownership of the property and is looking to, as Rob said, improve it a little bit. So we would keep any requirements that you guys would have also would be written into any proposal.
Any questions from the board? Laurel?
I
Yeah,
just
Mike,
have a
this-
question for AJ if he's on the line. If this property were to be sold because it is real property,
Same question I had.
would the proceeds of that sale go to the capital funds project or capital funds account, or would they go to the general fund?
Thank you, Trustee Crossman. My understanding is that it would go to capital projects, but it's something that I'll need to research a little bit more to be sure. I don't have an answer for you at the moment. I'm doing some research as we speak, so I'll try to find an answer quickly for you.
Joe, Laurel said thank you, AJ. Joe, I think you were wanting to ask a question?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. To Keith and Rob, I'm guessing the improvements you're looking is to create some new units. You guys, can you give us an idea what the proposed use of that property might be? How many units you're trying to put on there and whatnot?
Trustee Casiopo, we don't have an exact answer to that. The client, Mr. Fant, has obtained the services of a local engineer and architect. They've looked at the existing property. What they wanted to do there and found out they couldn't is they wanted to take the existing parking lot and put some covered parking to make it better for the existing residents. Also, maybe put a couple units up above those garages or carports, whichever they may be. And he talked at that time about doing the same on this property, a combination of parking, covered, and some apartment units. If you took a half acre zoning-wise, you could probably get about up to 15 units on it by zoning. But again, that might be limited by emergency accesses and different things, and landscaping and things that we'd want to do better than just cramming the maximum on there. It really was a way to get some overflow to what he currently has and improve the property. He inherited this property from his father. As Keith mentioned, he's managed that, Keith has, for many years, and he just wants to, kind of in a legacy, make that a better place. Not that it's bad now. It's a great neighborhood. He's maintained it well, but he just thinks it could use a facelift, and this expansion would just add value to the whole neighborhood. I hope that answered your question. I'm sorry I couldn't be more definitive.
No, that's okay. I appreciate that. And then I just have, while I'm on here, a question for Richard or AJ. Really the only concern I would have on this is not knowing, certainly we're going to have some budget issues, but not knowing what the future is going to hold for us. We voted to delay the Snyder property vote, and we own a few small pieces of land in town, this being one of them. And I would, do we have any thoughts on, or have we had any conversations about what we might do with this piece of land as, looking down the road?
Trustee Casiopo, this is Richard Stokes. I do not recall any discussions that I have had with trustees that would be in a planning mode for this particular property. As you recall, at one time it actually held what has been known in Western Nevada, a Babbitt house, which was moved to the location from the area of Hawthorne, Nevada. And for quite a number of years, there was actually hot lunch programs served out of that building. In about the year 2003 or 4, that building was demolished. And it has been an area that has been used by the city for storing snow that has been plowed during the winter. It's also held dumpsters in the past. But essentially, it's also been used by the school district as a place for overflow parking when there's been an event there at the PDC that needed extra square footage to park cars. But, the one thing about it is if you have the property, you can make decisions about it. Ultimately, if you don't have the property, then that is no longer available to you. Of course, we're in a place of growth in town, which is why the proposed, I think, offer for the property is here, if he's looking to put houses on the property. So where we have a shortage, really, of places to do things with, it does represent an opportunity for the district should you elect to hold on to the property for future growth. And we are in a time of growth here in the community.
Right. Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Stokes, before you leave, just to piggyback on that, has there ever been any discussion by the master plan or the bond oversight committee about that property?
The most recent, Richard Stokes for the record, the only recent modification that has happened there has been with the school-based health center. As you recall, we moved a portable building in there, and there were improvements that were done to the parking that's on the southern part of the property. And there was some fencing, and there was a little bit of facelift that was done to soften the fascia of that existing building. But as far as the portion to the north, that has really only been graded, and I think some fill was put in just to make it look a little nicer. Of course, some fencing and of course the sidewalks. I think there was some repair done there as well.
And Stacy, just to let you know, some of the conversations that I had with other members at the Bond Oversight Committee meeting when we were looking into the Snyder property and wondering where we would move kids, there was some discussion, and maybe it's just me with a pipe dream, but there was thoughts that there could be, once the middle schools were equalized, there would be additional, in populations, there'd be additional space at Carson Middle. And there was some, thoughtful aspirations to possibly move PDC to the middle school and create a pre-K center way down the line, that would be a spot where you could do something like that. So there's, I don't think it's anything official. It was just several people talking about what do you do if that was also looking at Snyder as possibly a 6th grade center or a pre-K center or a smaller middle school or whatever. Those were ideas that came out.
I think probably my concern is just that as we look around the city, there are buildings and structures going up on every vacant lot we have around here. And so eventually that's going to become our problem. And if we don't have places to expand our sites, I'm not sure that it would be a wise idea to get rid of one of the few plots of land we have that we could put an additional site at. If they put in 15 units, most of us probably know what the enrollment of Carson Middle School and Borderwick Bray Elementary School are. Where are those kids going to go? Eventually, we're going to have classrooms and sites to put these kids, and whether that means we have to add an additional building onto PDC or expand into the back of that building, that's one thing. We just don't know at this point, and I'm not sure it's a wise decision to get rid of our property based on just the growth that we're seeing. This economy is going to come roaring back, and then our discussions are going to resume where they were a few months ago. So that's my concern.
Yeah, Mike, and that was one of my thoughts. This is Joe. It's a unique site in that it's pretty centrally located. I'm working on a project in Washoe County where we're redoing a middle school on the same existing site, and we're kind of putting the building where the field was, and eventually the field to go where the existing building is as that building goes away. And if we were to do anything, this site has some, it's not huge, but it has some potential opportunities for us. And I'm kind of the same mindset. I think we have to be careful, not knowing what our future plans are, but knowing that we are going to experience growth, really strongly considering what we want to hold on to.
Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, I agree. Even though don't even have plans for it right now, but it doesn't mean that in a year or two, something may come up where we may need that property. So me personally, I'd be opposed to getting rid of it and selling it.
Stacy?
And I understand that concern. I would really like to find out from AJ where that money's gonna go. Because if it's gonna go to capital, that would be a total different discussion for me. But if it ends up, and depending on what the offer is, because of that land, and we could, save some of our budget cuts, that would be something I would like to look into.
I think that's a valid concern, but once that money's gone, it's gone. And the property will be here for when we may need it in the future.
I agree, and I mean, I ate lunch on that spot, so that property's been here for a long time. It hasn't been really utilized in a way that it could have or should have. And will we ever get to that point where we would have to utilize that? Or are we gonna be able to save programs and jobs? It just depends. And I'm not going either way. I would just like a little bit more of the facts and to find out, if we give them the go-ahead to give a letter of intent, does not mean that we're going to actually sell it to them. It means that we want to see what an offer would be, correct? Is that correct? So we wouldn't be obligated to say, they come back with an offer and we say yes. What we're doing is we're giving them an opportunity to get together with Mr. Stokes and figure out what a reasonable offer would be and what they could afford or what they're going to do, and actually have a plan and let us know how many units are going up there too, or if it's going to be a parking lot or, whatever the plans are going to be. That's all I'm saying, is I think that it's worth going the next step. I'm not saying I'm in favor or against, but I think it's an opportunity for this district, considering the financial situation that we are in and will be in the next couple of years.
Mr. President,
Yes.
if I may, I've researched more of the process of how to sell the property for you guys if you have the question, but the statutory scheme on the sale of real property provides that the proceeds from the sale will go through the treasurer and be credited to the building sites fund. And I can work with AJ to research more exactly what that means, but it does say that it goes to the building sites fund.
Thank you, Mr. Russell.
Thank you. And I guess, Joe, I'll call on you right after this. I think that it'd be fair to ask Mr. Stokes what his recommendation is, if you have a leaning either way on this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Walker, members of the board. I'm very conservative by nature, and just having seen, I drive every day past the big complex that's going up past the Fandango out there, and I just know that the town is growing, and so it would be my recommendation that we hang on to the property for the use of the school district.
Thank you. Joe, did you have something to add?
I guess to Stacy's concern, she has a good point, but I think when you look at the size of the property and the fact that you're going to need an easement for emergency vehicles, I don't know that the value of that property is going to be so much that it's going to save a lot, even if we could use it for general fund expenses. And I'm leaning in the direction of Richard that, there's a lot of unknown out there, and I think my opinion is it'd be wise to hold on to it.
So this is a item for action. I'll call for any public comment we've received.
seeing no public comment?
No emails. So I'll entertain a motion from the floor.
I move that the Carson City School District Board of Trustees do not authorize the superintendent to negotiate with representatives of Nevada Premier Commercial Real Estate on behalf of the owner of 701 West Telegraph Street for the potential sale of district property located north of the Professional Development Center, 604 West Musser Street, that consists of approximately 17,500 square feet, and bring any offers back to the board for consideration. So I guess what I'm saying is that I do not want to authorize it to go forward.
This is Joe. I'll second not authorizing it.
So we have a motion by Richard, a second by Joe. Richard, could I ask a clarification? If we're not authorizing this, I would guess we don't want the superintendent to bring further recommendations forward? Okay.
That the board of trustees do not authorize the superintendent to
Okay.
move forward.
Joe, were you okay with that as this person who seconded the motion?
Yes, I'm okay with that.
Any public comment, further board discussion?
I just have a comment now.
Go ahead, Stacy.
I just wanted to thank you guys and the owner for bringing this to us to decide. I think it was a great opportunity, and given the circumstances that where the money goes, it's a tough one, and we didn't know till right now. So, but I do appreciate your guys' time and your consideration.
Trustee Wilkie, the pleasure's ours. For your consideration, your time, you're very busy, you have a lot on your plate. I again want to thank Superintendent Stokes, Renee, all of you for your time, and you did a great job running this through, and your thought process was good to watch. I think you did a good job, so thank you so much. Not a problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Public comment?
No public comment, Mr. Walker.
Any emails? All right, I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you for coming to, before us. Next item on the agenda is the informational update on the 2019-2020 Summer School Enrichment and Intervention Program in the Carson City School District. This is for discussion only, and we welcome Tasha Fuson.
Thank you, President Walker. Tasha Fuson for the record. I wanted to take the opportunity this evening to share with you some of the wonderful activities going on this summer in our district for our students. My presentation is not up there.
At least the phone isn't hanging up on you yet.
True, very, very true. Okay, there we go. So what I have for you, and I might have to come over there. My clicker doesn't work for here. Oh, Miss Renee did remind me before here that I had to turn it on. There you go, Miss Renee, thank you. In our elementary schools, many of you have probably heard information being shared about MyOn Reading at the state level. It's actually part of the Nevada Reads program being sponsored by the Nevada Department of Education and MyOn Reading. So we are using that program within our schools. MyOn Reading is basically a digital library for students. It is a wonderful program in that it allows our teachers to create classrooms and track student reading and interventions that are provided through that program. So we can actually see where our students are reading in terms of their Lexile and track how much involvement they have throughout the summer, and then see where their Lexiles are at the end of the summer. And then in addition, we're utilizing ST Math. ST Math is a current program we use in 3 of our 6 elementary schools. We'll be using ST Math across all 6 elementaries next year. It actually stands for Spatial Temporal Reasoning is what the ST stands for. And basically, my understanding of the program is that it uses, it presents math in a visual way that students can manipulate math and then be able to understand conceptually what's going on when you're adding 2 plus 2. So it's also provides that math in a more of a interactive, fun environment than your typical would be just doing math facts or working on math sheets. So also within that program,
I was going to say, I have some elementary children who would disagree that it is fun and
That's fun.
interactive.
Thank you.
They're waiting for the penguin to go across the screen. Older elementary kids, so maybe it works for the younger grades better.
There you go. What I can tell you is that of our 3 schools that are currently using ST Math, and those teachers that are using it regularly in their classroom, their student growth is significantly higher than average than their colleagues. So these 2 particular programs are going to be open and available to all Carson City School District K-5 students. In addition, a couple of our schools, because they are Title I schools, actually have teachers that will be working over the summer to track and support students who have been targeted for intervention. So those are activities that have been launched at this point in time from the schools. We will be launching a PR program, if you will, about summer opportunities in our district on June 15th. And that is, we felt it would be a good idea to give our families like a 2-week break before we, push it out too much and start saying, hey, have you thought about some summer opportunities for your students to be enriched? But if you are at a school, at one of our schools that do have the targeted interventions going on, they are starting this week. So we do have teachers that will be working through that at the elementary.
So,
Yes, go ahead.
So did the kids have to turn in their Chromebooks, or these kids got to keep them, and do they have internet access?
So our schools worked with their families to identify those families that were in need of technology at home. We did not do a full technology rollout K-5 at the elementary schools. Instead, like for instance, Principal Ward over at Fremont shared that they did a sign up, and part of their sign up said, do you have internet access at home? Do you have technology access home? Are you in need of a device? And then they were able to just work with those families that needed devices so that they would have access to that at home. Some schools are handling that a little bit differently. I think Mark Twain had already worked with many of their families and knew those families that needed devices, so they were rolling them out on a little bit larger of a scale than Fremont was. So each school does have devices accessible to be checked out to families. And if our families did not have access or did not get to a device, they just need to call our district office, and then we will work with Raymond and his crew to make sure we get our families access devices, because we do want to really, really encourage our students to be involved. One thing that we do know is that students who do not keep up on their reading over summer have statistically speaking, usually lose about 3 months, regress about 3 months in their reading skills. Those students who do read frequently over the summer will actually move forward about 3 months. So by the time students return to school, they can actually be 6 months behind their peers if their peers were reading and they were not, if that makes sense. So we really, really, really encourage our families to get their students reading over the summer. And I was going to talk about it in a little bit, but I will tell you that on our district website, we do have a summer enrichment or summer programming webpage. And on that webpage, a couple of our amazing teachers in special assignment, Joanna Kaiser and Carrie Pryor, and actually Ananda Campbell helped them. They made a video that's going to be launched that shows parents how to access all of those resources, where to go on our webpage. And also on our webpage, it has directions for parents in English and Spanish on how to access, for instance, MyOn Reading, and how to access ST Math, how to get into those programs. And then there's just myriad other resources that our teachers have put together that families can access. For instance, like family read-along activities that can be done in the home over the summer, et cetera. And then our students who have second language needs have access to Rosetta Stone to continue working on their English skills over the summer. And so that information is also on our webpage. And again, it's part of the video where they explain how you can access that. That video is already made, and you can all access it and watch it if you'd like on our district webpage. We are not launching it to our families, like I said, until June 15th, simply because we wanted to give people a little bit of a break. But if you would like to preview it earlier, it's on there. And then after the 15th, it's actually going to be on the front homepage where typically you see pictures of what's going on in our district, so it's going to be there as a link.
So just going on those things, because of the way that we had to do the distance learning, there's a feeling in the community that we already have a lot of these kids are already 3 months or 6 months behind, or 6 weeks behind, because they haven't been in the classroom. And I'm sure these are the ones that you're targeting, but how do we make sure if they're not reading, you know, so then you talked about 6 months, so now you're talking about almost 9 months of them being behind. Do we have any net that we're catching those in and we know who those are?
So at this point in time, yes, the elementary schools, like I said, especially those that are title schools and they have title funding, have, like I said, the targeted support, the targeted intervention for their students that they've been tracking, and those who were less active in remote learning, in the remote learning process. It is open to all. We have actually provided at the district level support to our schools that don't have title funding. Their programs are not as extensive simply because of lack of funding from our title schools. So for instance, Fritch and Seeliger, as you all know, are not title schools, so they have more limited resources than our other 4 elementaries, but they are all working on continuing learning over the summer for those families. We do want it to be fun for kids, though. So hopefully our kids don't mind the little penguins marching across the screen, because we really do want it to be fun and interactive for kids. We don't want our kids coming back to school in August being burnt out on learning either. So again, one thing that Joanna has really done well is try to come up with a list of resources, again, a fun type of family resources that can be done in the home where it doesn't seem like it's a chore. It's not sitting and opening up the Chromebook and just typing away on math facts or on reading things that are not fun or interesting to them. What we have been told and what our preliminary findings are on the MyOn Reading is that there is a lot of resources for kids. So there are magazine articles, there are news articles. If you're into that and you want to read what's going on, like in sports, across the country, so there's access to that, as well as, I know I'm not, sports are not necessarily my thing either, but some of our kids really like that, so that's cool that it's there and it has that resource for them if they're interested in music, if they're interested in art, if they're interested in just reading, regular traditional books that you would see in a library in our school classroom. They're there as well. So many of our teachers have actually already gotten their own children on there and having them test drive it, so to speak, and we've had really positive feedback from those folks about the accessibility for students and the interactiveness for our students. So we're hopeful that will engage our students and get them excited about learning. And then, like I said, Mrs. Campbell did a phenomenal job putting together all the resources through the Nevada libraries, as well as our district library, and how students can access that. So for middle schoolers and high schoolers, as well as elementary schoolers, they can access ebooks on our website, so they can listen to books if they want to do that. They can also check out, ebooks and audiobooks. So ebooks being you can just read on a screen, or audiobooks where it can read to you. So there's a lot of resources for K-12 students in terms of accessing books.
Going to be my question is, are you, in addition to the MyOn and ST Math, are you also putting out there to parents ease of the library? Because we did several ebooks for my children during the remote learning period. Another resource that mine have enjoyed is Khan Academy, and you can sign up for free to get an account. They really loved the math programs that they were doing on that. So are you going to give parents a couple other options that are out there that are free to look into as well?
Yes. So basically, right now, what I was sharing with you is our structured program for summer learning opportunities. But on our remote learning page, on our summer learning page, that will continue to be added to as we are actually soliciting that information from our teachers district-wide on what their kids are used to and what they can access independently. So knowing that we have limited resources for summer programming, we've had to really focus in on what we can provide direct support with, but we will put links to all of those things that our students are used to using in the classroom and therefore might not need direct support for, they just need access to. So they will have access to that. Actually, our families can access and our students can access Clever, which is where all of our icons live, if you will, our access point for all of these programs for our students. So they can still work on those. Some of our students, for instance, work on Dreambox, which is a math program. So if students were working on Dreambox in their elementary schools and they like that particular program, they can still access that through the summer as well. But this in particular, like I said, is about targeted intervention support. And at the middle schools, we use Edgenuity. Edgenuity is online curriculum. They do have a really broad variety of classes that students can take on there that focus on social emotional learning as well as core academics. So at both of our middle schools, they have identified students that, again, due to their performance during second semester have been identified for targeted support. Those students have been signed up and have teachers following them. Then they have also opened it up and sent information home to families on enrichment programming. So those families who wanted to have access for their students to work on core curricular areas over the summer to hopefully kind of boost where they're at, they have access to that as well. So at both of our middle schools, the contact folks there are the counselors. So if we have families that are listening that have not had the opportunity to take advantage of that programming, we ask them to reach out to their middle school counselor, and the middle school counselors can get them signed up. So I do know I've heard from, actually AJ was telling me that even with his Eagle Valley student that they've received, he as a parent received that information for the optional programming. So again, if someone has not received that, I urge them to reach out to the counselor so that we can get them connected to that program. At the high school level, it looks a little bit different. So we obviously have our traditional summer school. This year, because of our circumstances, we are not having in-seat summer school, but we are offering distance education. So much in the same way that we did for the remote learning program. Students are working in that same type of format, meaning that they do have access to core area teachers that will be supporting them and tutoring them. But they will be using Pearson curriculum. So it is actually distance education curriculum that will be utilized in our summer school classes. But we have teachers that will be there supporting them as well.
So with the governor's order that he put out today, it kind of asks districts to prioritize students with special needs, those experiencing homelessness or lack of devices at home. Is there any discussion to maybe open up a small group for those kids to come and work with those tutors?
So we do have access to in-person tutoring. That was always in our planning from the beginning. Simply, we don't want students to be required to come in seat. Actually, at the time when we started planning, obviously, we didn't know if we were going to be able to do that, but we did know that we could have groups of 10 or less as long as we have proper social distancing. So our teachers will be on site at Carson High School working out of the computer labs. And yes, if a student has difficulty with accessing equipment or needing to come in for tutorial support, we have employed a special ed parapro and an EL parapro to provide support to our special needs populations. And yes, they can actually come in and have more hands-on support if they need that. So that is in place. It's not really shifting because again, that was planned to begin with simply because we knew we could do groups of 10. But we definitely, our counselors at both high schools have reached out to those students who are credit deficient and who needed extra credits to get caught up, and have targeted those students and have tried to work with those students to figure out what supports they need in order to be able to access the curriculum effectively. So summer school will continue. I do know we have 67 students currently as of today, the end of the day at Carson High School. Mr. Chambers was sharing with me, jumping into summer school. That's slightly less than we normally do, but not much. It's only about 10 students less than we typically have at Carson High School in the summer. So I am pleasantly surprised that we didn't have a bigger impact in terms of students choosing not to participate. So I'm happy to hear where they're at. And this is only day 2. So tomorrow will actually be the last day that students can come in and get signed up for summer school. They can't miss more than 3 days in summer school simply because that doesn't allow them enough time to complete the course. And then we do have staff that continue to work with our students, even though summer school at the high schools only runs till the end of June. We do have some learners who require special ed services and or English language support who are given extensions through the month of July. And Jill, council continues to work with them all the way through the summer if they require extended time to complete their courses. And she has done that for a long, long time and continues to provide that support to our students. So we've always been very successful in our district with high school, summer school with about a 96-97% pass rate, which is higher than our in-seat pass rate. They do a wonderful job. And then again, we were lucky enough to work with Valerie Dockery. Carson High School has 21st Century grant funds, and that is actually what's providing the support for us to actually continue to have core teachers. So even though it's online curriculum, and even though students can access online teachers, we are actually having teachers, Carson High School teachers, who will be maintaining virtual classrooms and be able to do Google Meets with those students and provide those students those supports, and or if they need to come in person to be able to sit with those students. So I'm excited to see what those results are. And then Mr. Chambers also, he is our ACT guru at Carson High and has been for the last couple of years taking on the task of trying to provide support for our kids. So he's actually highly encouraging his students to continue ACT and SAT prep over the summer. There is listed, and these are on our district's webpage as well as Carson High School webpage, different programs that are free to students that they can continue the SAT, ACT prep. And so they're on the board up there. There's ACT Academy. There is prepfactory.com and 4tests.com. 4tests.com is actually has ASVAB prep as well. So for students who might be wanting to take the Arms Services Vocational Aptitude Battery or ASVAB, they can prep for it on 4tests.com. So that information, again, has been on our district webpage and will be shared out with our families in terms of, for our high schoolers, different types of enrichment they can do. And actually for our families at middle school, ACT Academy actually has prep for middle schoolers. So it's free. You can go on to ACT Academy. You can prep for SBAC. You can also prep for taking the pre-ACT if you are so inclined to at the middle school level and you want to jump in on that. That's available to our families as well. And then at as you can see in this picture, that is our district webpage. So where you find it is in red, right underneath the picture. It says, click here for summer learning resources. That takes you to our summer learning resource page. And then where you see the picture up there, that's where when on the 15th, when we launch our program, that we will actually have the video. So families can go and click on the video and they can actually get a little tutorial about where you find all of these resources and how to click on them and how to get support if you need support to get signed up. So that's where we are right now with summer learning opportunities for our district. Our staff, I want to say I'm very, very proud of our staff members because they have really learned a lot in the last 2 months of remote learning and have really shared their talents and their information and their ideas. So the video was purely Joanna Kaiser's her thought, her project, and she pitched it to her team and said, hey, I want to do this. And they turned it around in a very short period of time. And of course, our public information officer, Dan, helped her get it all together. But so please watch it. I think it's about 8 minutes, but it kind of highlights some of the wonderful things that we're doing in our district. And in addition to that page that I was talking about that Mrs. Campbell put together, it has amazing pictures of students from all of our 6 elementary schools reading books and celebrating reading. So it is all there for you to view.
So I think that probably just to touch on what Stacy was saying, I think that most of us share concerns about learning gaps going into next school year, and I think we're all of the mindset that school's going to look probably different than anything we are prepared for at this point because we don't know what is going to happen. But I think resources like this are great. Edgenuity is tied to their MAP scores, and so it's, Khan Academy, you could get on there and learn about whatever you want, but at least with Edgenuity, we know where that kid with their last MAP scores, what their needs are, and could kind of plan remediation for some of those gaps. And then I think with programs like Myon, once the kid downloads those books, they could download as many as they want. They don't need internet access. And I think that's huge because we have a lot of families who don't have reliable internet access. And so if we could provide devices, which it sounds like we have, and then an opportunity to download those books, they'll have access to really good level, high level reading materials, and I think that that's huge. And one of the nice things is that resource is available to our schools through December. So it's not just a summer thing. So the Department of Education made that available to all Nevada students through December, which I think is huge. As a teacher, I'd be like, oh, that's awesome, especially if I had one-to-one devices in my classroom.
Absolutely. And just to give you an idea, I know Fremont reported in some preliminary numbers, but they did have, I'm hoping my memory is correct, I think it was 47 students who have agreed to work with the school on their targeted intervention program, and another 40 students who've signed up for the voluntary summer program. So they have 87 students at this point in time that have committed to the summer learning program there. I don't have solid numbers from the rest of the schools yet, but they will be reporting that in as they get their programs launched and going.
Well, and I'm sure a lot of our families just need a few days to exhale.
Absolutely.
It's hard work keeping your kids doing digital learning, I think.
Absolutely.
As
Again,
Laurel
I
has
think,
told us many days.
absolutely, and that's why I think, again, a couple people got started a little bit earlier, but most of the schools said absolutely we want to wait until June 15th. Give our kids 2 weeks to take a breath, and then we'll get going and try to get them excited about learning in the middle of summer.
And some parents are concerned about the extra screen time that they've had all through remote learning. And I know that there's some parents that are going to be still concerned about the screen time in the summer. So I don't know what we do, but I'm going to give them real books too.
Absolutely. Definitely. Real books are always a good thing.
And the Carson Library has their summer reading program going on too, which we can coordinate with. When you get those numbers, could you just email those when you have
Sure.
your complete numbers with the
Yeah.
elementaries and stuff?
Absolutely.
Tasha, I do have a question for you. The 67 students that you have enrolled for the summer school, are those different levels, or is it mainly all seniors, or?
No, mostly it's freshmen through juniors. And actually with the vast majority of them being freshmen. So we find, I don't have their specific breakdown, but we do find that normally as the students get closer to graduation, the less problems we have with keeping them on track for graduation. Freshmen typically struggle. I do know from Mr. Zona, however, he had a celebration. And again, I'm hoping that I have his numbers correct in my head, but I think he said they had 47 seniors graduate. They have added, I think, 4 more who've completed their graduation requirements since their promotion ceremony or the graduation ceremony, and I think he has 5 more that are finishing up this summer. So when he's all said and done, he should be about 56. So if you look at that, there's about 9 or 10 Pioneer students that needed summer to finish up on a couple things, but they are right on track to be done before summer is over. So that's a celebration for them. So I know we do have a couple of seniors, but it's mostly freshman and sophomore.
Question I was going to ask you is, how are the parents being informed about these amazing resources that are going to be available to their kids during the summer?
So each one of the elementary schools, actually each one of the schools, not just the elementary schools, have already sent home information to their families about their specific site programs. My goal was simply to make sure that we are able to support our schools in communicating to their families and to the community all the things that we're doing district-wide. So right now, at this point in time, letters have gone home from schools and our phone calls from site staff, again, to do their enrollments and set those kids up. From our end, again, other than putting it on our webpage, Dan, our public information officer, has put together a press release that will go out to all the news stations. And then he'll actually be sending it out to an email and phone call communication group that he has. He did tell me today it's something like 22,000 emails that will go out, I'm pretty sure is what he said to me, with all of this information to our community members, those who have signed up for information from our district. So that will all be coming out, like I said, on June 15th when we launch it. So there will be a whole PR part that goes with it.
Well, it sounds like great things are happening. Thank you so much for keeping us informed and doing what you're doing for our families. We appreciate everything. Go ahead.
Just a comment. I appreciate if you send that information to us about how many kids voluntarily sign up, because I'm really curious of how many kids are going to voluntarily sign up after having the distant learning for the last 2 or 3 months. And I think a lot of kids are kind of burned out on doing this distant learning. And so I am curious, so I appreciate that information. And hopefully it's successful. I think it's a great program, and I hope everybody takes advantage of it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so the next item on the agenda is discussion on newly proposed CCSD Policy 555, Safe Exposure to the Sun. This is our first reading, and it's for discussion only. Ms. Fuson.
Thank you, President Walker. Tasha Fuson for the record. Senate Bill 159 of the 2019 legislative session required school districts to develop a policy regarding the use of sunscreen in schools. There was a couple parameters that were required in that bill, specifically that the policy must provide that sunscreen not be considered a medication sold over the counter, and that students be allowed to apply sunscreen to their own skin when they're participating in outdoor activities, and that also that they must be able to wear clothing which complies with the dress code of school, if any, designed to protect against exposure to the sun, including without limitation a hat, and possess and self-administer sunscreen. So the big takeaway, I think, to this was that the concern is that many schools, especially for elementary schools, were concerned about allowing students to put sunscreen on when they were outside. Luckily, I don't think it was ever a concern in our district, but apparently in other districts it was a concern. So we are complying with the Senate bill and have put together a proposed policy and regulation. So on policy, the new proposed policy 555, we basically simply, as is in alignment with the rest of our policies, put a kind of a position statement about our belief that it's important that our students stay safe and healthy and adhere to safe exposure to the sun. So that is very brief, but within our regulation is where we put more specifically the guidelines for staff and for students and for families about that. Any concerns or questions with the policy statement on the policy?
Go ahead, Don.
I just had just one area, and I'm probably being real picky here. When you talk about it seeks to provide sun safety and skin cancer prevention and awareness, would we maybe say promote instead of provide? We aren't providing really, I know later on you talk about, we're not providing the sunscreen, they can bring it with them, right? We
Correct.
talk about that.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that really matters or.
I think that's a good change.
Happy to change it.
So you're proposing changing provide to promote?
Yes.
Okay. I think that's fair. Anybody else? Okay, seeing none, thank you. We
You're
look forward
welcome.
to seeing the second reading of this.
You made it easy on me. One word change is easy to do.
Item number 10 on the agenda, discussion of the newly proposed CCSD Regulation 555, safe exposure to the sun. This is for discussion only. Ms. Fuson.
Thank you, Tasha Fuson for the record. So here's where obviously we see more of the meat to how this is addressed within our district. So in our regulation, we start with definitions for our stakeholders so that at least we're all on the same page about what that means. It's pretty straightforward under the regulation. Number one, use of sunscreen. It does, as the bill required, Senate bill required, then state that students are allowed to carry and apply sunscreen without a physician's note or prescription. I know, and that they're not considered an over-the-counter medication. So it does state too that unless they are siblings, that they may not share sunscreen. I think at first, I'll be honest with you, when I was looking at that guidance from the bill, I kind of giggled to myself, but now it makes a heck of a lot more sense, being that we're where we're at with COVID right now, that we wouldn't want our students to share those types of items with each other. And then we do not want to require our staff or volunteers to provide or apply sunscreen. I think that makes sense in terms of why we wouldn't want an adult applying sunscreen to a child that is not their own child. However, it does say that they may assist a student who's unable to physically apply sunscreen when requested by the student and authorized by the parent or guardian. So again, it might seem like it's overly cautious, but I'm sure everyone can kind of understand why we would be
I'm just
concerned.
wondering, will the authorization be in the beginning of the year packet? So you can say, yes, you can put sunscreen on my kid if they ask.
I think
That's just going to be added to that, maybe?
No, I don't think we would do a blanket permission like that. I think it would look more like it's going to be field day and your child's going to participate in field day. And if you would like to send in sunscreen with your child to be used, and if you would like your child to have help, sign here, something like that versus a blanket statement on it. But, I mean, I think we'll have to work with our schools to see what works best for them. I just, like I said, I wouldn't want to put that in a blanket policy. And then 2, protective clothing specifically outlines the fact that students and staff will be permitted to wear clothing designed to protect against exposure to the sun, including but not limited to hats, which cover the ears and the back of the neck. It does have to comply to school dress code. In that, we don't allow hats, but the reason for that is, for instance, we don't want obscene slogans or statements that would not normally fall in line with school dress code. So although hats are not allowed in this case, they're permitted as long as the rest of it falls in line with the school's dress code. And that schools that have mandatory student uniforms shall allow for the flexibility in the uniform when students are outside. Again, so if we have standard school attire at a school, if they're at PE, if they're out at lunch, then they should be permitted to wear items that protect them from the sun. Other protective measures, talks about limiting exposure to the sun during very high peak times. So obviously our students do go out for physical education, so it's more of an awareness factor for teachers and coaches, et cetera, that they need to be aware of sun exposure for students, and that they should be suggesting to their students to wear sunscreen when they go outside, and sunglasses. And then number 4 gives the Superintendent Stokes, or his designee, it doesn't say that, but I'm sure he'll designate people to do this, but the authority to adopt procedures necessary to implement the provisions of the regulation. And that's not limited to granting exceptions to the dress code, and implementing sun safety and skin cancer prevention and awareness lessons and activities in schools. So currently within our health curriculum, they do talk about sun safety, and safe exposure. And then also, each site, as you know, they do follow the board's dress code policy. And then if you have, if the school has standard school attire, then it's more restrictive on top of that. So the intent of that is to make sure that schools are properly informing their families and their students of those requirements. And in this particular case, the fact that that hats and sunglasses would be permitted outside, even if it's not permitted in their normal dress code. And then this is in guidelines with NRS 392.453, which is where you find the results of the Senate bill having being placed into the NRS. And other areas within our board policies and procedures, for instance, the dress code, which is board policy 519 and regulation 519, dress and grooming, as well as 519.1, standard school attire. So instead of going in and changing every single one of those items to reflect sunblock and hats and sunglasses being permitted, this particular policy supersedes those and adds to that.
Questions from the board? And Dawn?
I just have a question on the, and I see that it is that they're encouraged to, but they use a PABA-free sunscreen product. And my question is, the statute just says sunscreen. It doesn't specify PABA-free. And I understand that PABA can be an allergen to some people, but I'm wondering if we intend to enforce this. Is it just a recommendation? Because to me, sometimes those PABA-free sunscreens are more expensive than the other sunscreens, and if the children are bringing their own sunscreens, does it matter that we say this, or do we just leave it open? I just don't want somebody saying, oh, you can't use that because that, and I understand you don't want the risk of allergens, but if they're using it on themselves and not sharing, do we want to restrict what types of sunscreens they can use?
When I read that as they have the choice, though, right? We encourage it.
That's the way it was intended, that we encourage the use of that. And that would be, for instance, the same thing as that when we would send information to families and say, we encourage you to not bring, peanut butter to school. We can't force them. I know you can have, peanut butter free zones, et cetera, but I don't think that was the intent of this, is my point, is just to say we would encourage families to do this. I don't think there will be an enforcement or a penalty or not allowing if it's not PABA free.
And I guess that's just my concern, is if somebody looking through this staff member, for whatever reason doesn't allow someone to use it if it's not PABA free, if somebody takes it that way. So I'm not sure that. You think it doesn't matter that it's there?
That's going to be Stacy's job. She's going to check all the sunscreen for us.
I can absolutely remove it if you're more comfortable with that. It's not a concern. It's just one of those, again, encouraged to, here's best practices. It's best if you do this.
Here's my thought on this. And as a site administrator, it seems like every year there's more and more allergens and issues that parents are raising. And so I think that if there's a potential that somebody's child is allergic to that, of course, we're going to, encourage somebody to use something that isn't. Just like we don't allow, I don't know, peanut butter and cupcakes for most classrooms or whatnot because of nut allergies or whatnot. So I personally don't think it's bad to have, we're encouraging that if it's going to help some of our students. We're not mandating it. It's just we're asking them to be careful, in my thought when I read through that.
I'm just thinking
Yeah,
as
this
a
is-
parent, I'm sending my kid with the sunscreen that I have, that I know if I have one who's allergic, which I have a nephew who's allergic to PABA, he has his own bottle that he uses, his siblings aren't. But I don't know, I wouldn't want to feel like I need to go out and buy a different type of sunscreen to send to school with them or to have them used that way. But that's just my thought.
Yeah, this is Joe, I don't read it that way. I think it's fine the way it's written because we're just saying you're encouraged to do this. But if somebody doesn't have it or doesn't know how to get that type of sunscreen, I don't read this to mean anyone's going to enforce it. I think it's good to have it because it gets people thinking about the options that are out there. And despite our best efforts, when you're not looking, some kids are going to share with others. So anything we can do to minimize that risk, without enforcing it, I think is a good idea.
Don, you had a comment?
Yeah, I just have under regulation 1A, I just have maybe a little change for clarity. That first sentence, students shall be allowed to carry and apply sunscreen without a physician's note or prescription. Maybe put a period there and then get rid of the and just put sunscreen shall not be considered an over-the-counter medication. Just to be a little more clear that that's what, instead of the and, but that was just.
All right, any other questions or comments? All right, thank you. Moving on to item number 11, discussion on proposed changes to CCSD policy 212, homework, first reading. This is for discussion only. Ms. Fuson.
Thank you, Tasha Fuson, for the record. So policy 212 has not been revised since August 29th of 1979. Very interesting backstory to this is Mrs. Kima actually started work on this, not obviously this year, but last year, at the beginning of last year, and brought it to our principals' meetings. We started having conversations in it, and we didn't really get anywhere with those conversations because there was just a vast difference of opinions about what it would look like in elementary, middle, and high school. So at that point in time, she actually asked me to take it to our parent group and talk to some of the high school parents about their feeling about the policy. And I got really good feedback from them in terms of wanting to have some guidelines, and really what the concern was more about limiting homework on the high end versus, requiring homework. So I just wanted to put that out there for a backstory so that we'll address that more when we get into the regulation, but to kind of understand where that came from. And then at the beginning of this year, it was brought back to my attention by Joanna Kaiser, our GATE coordinator, and apparently it had been a conversation at the GATE Advisory Committee several times about potentially needing some clarification regarding middle school homework, because at that point in time, at the high school level, again, the concern was maybe about too much homework, and at the middle school, it was not enough or no homework, and many of our teachers were under the impression that it was district or board policy that students could not be given homework in middle schools. So it was an interesting conversation that came to play. So students were given homework in elementary, then supposedly not being allowed to have homework in middle school, and then get to high school and having just extremely high amounts of homework or loads of homework. So again, that brought it to the table again for discussion. So what I did is I took it to my coordinator meeting. So I meet with our district coordinator. So of course we have special ed, ELL, GATE, and then all the subject areas, represented at those meetings and said, okay, if this is the team that needs to take this on, because you each work with teachers, and bring your ideas to the table for us to really take a look at. So they went out and solicited input from their respective teacher groups, and we did also quite a bit of research into best practices across the country, and we looked at several different districts' policies around homework. So that is the background that we had, and then we put together the proposed policy and regulation. Once we put that policy and regulation together, then I brought it back to the principals and said, okay, since we had a hard time agreeing on whether or not we should even tackle this last year, let's look at it this year. And I got feedback from our principals at all levels about what they thought should be within the policy. And then I also sent it to OCEA and had OCEA give us some feedback on what they thought should be in the policy and whether or not it was reflective of those concerns. So that's kind of the work that was done. That being said, on policy 212, you can see that it really doesn't change the intent of the policy. I think the hope was that this policy statement kind of brought it up to speed with the fact that we're in 2020 at this point in time. So it just kind of explained it a little bit more with the fact, for instance, that homework is an extension of the instructional process, right? And that the primary intent must be to improve competency of students in the particular topic for which it's being assigned. In other words, we don't give students homework for bringing Kleenex to school. We don't give them homework for covering a textbook. So if it's going to be assigned as homework, it really needs to be instructionally related. So that's what we tried to capture in this statement, this policy statement. And making sure that also that last statement, guidelines governing the assignment of homework will be provided to teachers and enforced by site administrators. So again, making sure that it's the communication piece. So when we get into the regulation, you'll see more about those details, but that was the thought behind the changes here on this policy statement.
Questions from the board? Comments?
I just have a comment about the homework at middle school and teachers not thinking they could give it or should give it. I have a granddaughter in 6th grade, and I tell you, she had sometimes several hours of homework during some of the nights. So it must not have been an across-the-board policy there.
I don't think that policy, I don't think it was a policy, what I'm saying, or even practice. I think it was the teachers questioning whether or not that was a thing or not, right? Whether or not that was the district's expectation or the board's expectation, and then wanting or the desire to have clarification or some guidance in writing for them to follow.
Anything else? Okay, this is the first reading. We'll see you the next time. So our
Thank you,
next
sir.
item on the agenda is item 12, discussion on proposed changes to CCSD regulation 212, assignment of homework for discussion only. Ms. Fuson.
Thank you, Tasha Fuson, for the record. So in recrafting the regulation for assignment of homework, this particular regulation had not been revised since 1993, so again, also needed some work. The first step here was really, it was felt by the committee who worked on putting this together that it was important that we start out with a strong statement of preparing students for college and career readiness is an essential goal in the district's plan. So they wanted to put that out there. In other words, teachers don't give homework to kids just for fun. Teachers are not going, how can I torment this student? Or, how can I make extra work for myself? It's really about trying to prepare our students for college and career readiness. And that is the true purpose and the guiding principle. And then also that it reinforces classroom learning, builds responsibility, and develops essential study habits. And that very last statement on the first paragraph, homework must be planned to strike a balance between academics, family life, and the student's needs. Again, when we were it was a very interesting process, trying to capture kinder through 12th. What does that look like? And from our students, our classes with students that were really trying to do interventions and remediations all the way up to advanced placement courses. And how can we somehow capture everyone's beliefs about homework and about how that needs to to be shared, and also all of our stakeholders, so from the parent perspective, from the student perspective, from the teacher perspective, from the administrator perspective. So that's the reason why that particular statement's in there, is we do want to recognize that we do have to strike a balance for our families. You know, having 6 hours of homework a night is not an acceptable expectation for students. But also, not having any homework for students is not an acceptable expectation either. So striking that balance. And that Roman numeral 1, responsibility, most of those numbers, at least 1 through 6, actually exist in the current regulation. We just reworded them and finessed them to kind of, again, bring them up to being more current. So those are not new concepts. So for instance, like number 1, in general, homework should not be assigned over the weekends or during holidays. That's in our existing regulation. And we believe that. Now, there's going to be exceptions to that, right? Especially if you're in an honors or an AP course. And if it's a long project, most of the time they're long, lengthier projects where students have the opportunity to complete them prior to that long break. Moms and dads, they're usually given plenty of time to complete them prior to the break, but sometimes choose not to work on them until the break. But that is a student choice. So I'm just saying, so we try to work with teachers on that and say, you know, we are asking you not to assign students homework that is specifically only assigned to be done over breaks. Okay. Again, number 2, homework should never begin unless the teacher is absolutely certain that it's going to be reviewed and checked. Super important that we don't give students busy homework. And that's something we want to communicate to our teachers. If you don't plan on checking it and reviewing it and giving feedback, then don't give it. Because what statement do you make to your student? If it's not important enough for you to check and grade it and give them feedback, then why is it important enough for them to do it? So that statement is there.
And this is one of the ones that I spoke with Mr. Stokes about, is I think we need to even make that a stronger statement. I would just say homework will be reviewed and checked and feedback provided to the student within a reasonable time frame. I think if a lot of these kids, when we talk about that balance between academics, family life, and student needs, some of these kids, and I'm talking as early elementary school, spend hours and hours each night doing sports and other events, and then they get home at 9, 10 o'clock at night, and their parents are calling me in the morning about not being able to get all the homework done and temper tantrums. And I think that if we're going to assign it, we're going to ask families to take time away from their family lives to do the work, then we have an obligation to grade that work. It should have a relevant purpose, and we should provide that feedback. I feel strongly about that.
I have no problem taking that statement out. I will change that to homework will be reviewed and checked and feedback provided to students within a reasonable time frame.
I think this is the regulation that goes to staff. I think we need to keep the negative in there, that homework will never be given, should never be given unless the teacher is absolutely certain. I think that is a good instruction in it too. And then you could change it to the more positive about it. I think you need to put the should never be in there as well.
Yeah, I just didn't want it to be confusing. I mean, I wanted this statement to be, if you're given homework, you're grading it and you're giving feedback, and you're going to do it in a timely manner. You know what I mean? However we stress that, I think I don't care about most teachers I know are pretty certain they're going to grade work, and then the reality of the next week hits, and they're either sick or 5 kids, or you know what I'm saying? So, I mean, I think that I don't care if we leave that in there. I just think we need a strong statement expectation as if we're assigning homework that we're grading it. People are taking a lot of time to do those assignments, and that means it's important. And so we need to take our time to give that feedback.
Absolutely.
Tasha, if I could, real quick, as long as we're talking about assignment of homework, what are we going to do if a parent, especially in elementary school, says, and I know it's happened, my kid is not going to do homework, and they just don't turn any in, and what's the policy going to be on that?
So I don't know, Trustee Varner, if we really can have a policy on that. That comes to teachers' grading practices in the classroom as it gets to further on within here. What we don't want to do is we don't want to set up students for failure because they don't have the time or the ability or access to be able to do homework in the home. So we know, especially at the high school level, we have several students who have jobs and work. And although homework is very important, and it is an extension of the learning opportunities in the classroom, it is not the only thing that students should be doing to learn. So assessments and assessing student learning becomes a very important thing when it comes to pass-fail. I mean, this really gets down to conversations that principals have to have with their staffs in terms of what the belief and the values are at that site level, and make sure it's communicated beyond this to families. So what I mean by that is, as we transition to remote learning, we had a lot of interesting feedback from teachers really grappling with the concept of pass-fail. This is off topic a little bit, but really trying to figure out, many of them wanted to know, well, what percentage is a pass? Like, are you telling me, Mrs. Fuson, that if the kid gets a 40%, it's a pass? Or where am I going to set that? And I keep telling them, you're missing the point. The point is that we need to take a look at whatever evidence of learning that we have for the student, whatever it is. Okay, and that one piece of evidence needs to be really looked at to assess, has the student learned what they were supposed to learn? They demonstrate that they have at least minimum mastery of that, enough mastery that they can move on to the next concept and have a reasonable shot at being able to do that. And so we've started some great conversations in our district around what that means. So although, again, in this particular regulation, in policy, we do believe homework is very important, but we also know in the world that we live in today, for many of our families, just the sheer act of having to carve out time to sit down and have their children work on homework is really a struggle. We have many students who are qualified for McKinney-Vento because they're living with other families, and they might be in a very small space with a lot of people in that space and not be able to have enough quiet time to do that. We know, again, like I said, we have several high schools who have jobs, et cetera. So again, in this particular part, we wanted to give guidance to folks to say, here's what we believe you needed to take into consideration as teachers. This is what's expected, and communication is key. But also, you can't make homework an end of everything. So if the student doesn't do homework, they automatically fail this course, because that is just compliance, and we want to get away from compliance. We want to get to authentic learning and authentic assessment of student learning. So I hear that concern. I know exactly what you're saying, and those are when we're really working, hopefully, with our schools to say, what other avenues do we have for this student? Is there after-school programming the student can come to? The Boys and Girls Club are a wonderful partner. They actually have a homework space within their after-school program. So for instance, all of our remote learning packets, the extra remote learning packets, they came and got them so that they can use them in their summer learning program this summer, so that they can help our kids keep up or catch up and not be behind. So we have to look to other ways to address that concern, Trustee Varner, I think, really, versus trying to put that in policy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm just concerned if there's, I know it's happened, like I said, that some parents just says, my kid's not doing homework. And I know in the elementary schools, first, second grade, the homework's not really graded. It's checked and the mistakes are pointed out, and then it's either star or whatever, and it's given back to the student. But I'm wondering if some of the students who are just not doing homework, is there some way to address it so where they get that practice also? I don't know.
Yeah, and many of those things are done, for instance, in the after-school programming. So I'm going to use Carson High School as an example. That was the 21st Century program that I was referring to. So that's what Solutions, so Carson High School calls it Solutions. So teachers are really encouraged that if they have students who are not completing homework, to refer those students to the Solution program, to call the parents. The administration helps make those communications and actually get that student involved in that program so that they can actually do their homework on site before they go home, in case that home environment doesn't lend itself to homework being done. Sometimes it's just families are super busy in the evening and there's just no time to carve out within that home time frame for it to do. So we have to look at the other support and ways to help support those students. Most of our elementaries have some form of after-school programming. So typically we try to reach out to our families and get the kids set up in that environment to support.
And one of the things I've told teachers a lot we can't force parents to do anything. And so I think most teachers I know, if a kid isn't doing homework, there's a lot of creative ways most teachers will work with kids to get them caught up, and a few extra minutes during snack time or come in the morning before school. I think, you know what I mean? Our teachers have big hearts, and they understand that some of these families have really difficult times at home, and parents might be working 2 or 3 jobs and not home to help with homework. And so I think that it'd be really hard to put that in policy. I think that the hope is that our teachers are doing what's best for kids, and they're going to work with them in those circumstances.
Yeah, Mike, this is Joe. I agree with that. I think on the elementary level, and I don't know about all levels, but homework's on the report card, so there is a way to assess it. And I agree with you. You can't force people to do it, but they are held accountable in that regard. My overall, I like the policy and I like the regulation, but in there a few times we talk about the amount of homework being of reasonable length, and I don't really know what that means. You know, I mean, I know what it means, but I think it means something different for everybody. And one thing I know that the classroom is such a busy place now between disciplinary issues and other items that have to occur or the teacher has to do that takes away from some of the teaching time. You wind up having to sometimes throw more homework at these kids. And while I'm not recommending we put it in a regulation, you know, I've been advocating for more time teaching during the existing school day. And I don't know if there's a way in the regulation or if we should put some kind of guidelines on, you know, what is a reasonable amount of time to be doing homework.
So that is actually in the regulation, Trustee Cassioppo. That is actually on page 3, Roman numeral 2. So if you, in terms of, and that was taken from research, and but however, if I can just circle back to a statement that you made, to go through number 3 and number 4 on page number 1, specifically those are meant to address some of the things that you said. So number 3 says assigned homework must have a stated purpose and link to grade level standards, and also points out that students have to know and have to be told and shown what are they supposed to be doing. Do they know what's expected of them, and do they have time to actually start that homework so that they don't go home and say to a parent, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do, which we hear a lot, right? And in reality, I'm going to side with the kid on this, because having been a building administrator for 17 years and having observed and evaluated teachers for 17 years, there is many times, especially in the secondary environment, where homework is written on the board, and the teacher will get lost in time, as you're stating, Mr. Cassioppo, and then it becomes, oh, don't forget your homework was this, this, this. And not that the teacher never addressed it in the classroom, but a lot of times kids will say, well, yeah, my teacher talked about that. Yeah, I get it. Well, this is from a parent because I have 3 kids. My kids told me this all the time. My teacher supposedly taught that, but what they taught was not what it looks like on the paper, and now I don't know how to do that. So that is the reason for actually saying, you know, it's very important that students need to start homework in the classroom specifically so they can answer questions or ask questions and have questions answered. So for instance, in math is really where the biggest challenge is with that. One of the things I often work with my math teachers at Carson High School on, and I would say to them, is this is the other complaint as a parent. With 3 kids who are now in college, and I've still tried to help them with college math too, which is scary. But they would say, you know, or if they did let us do some math problems, Mom, it was the easy ones, because the easy ones always come first, right? So I said to our math teachers, why, if you are giving them time to start their homework, are you not having them do 2 in the first section, 2 in the second, and 2 in the third, to make sure that they're understanding that the homework problems get progressively more challenging? That's the way it's built, right? You practice this discrete skill, then they add another skill onto it, and then by the time you get here, you're applying 3 different things at the same time. So just really working with our teachers to understand that, and that's what number 3 is really getting to, right? Your kids should not go home and go, I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing. Because in my scenario, many parents don't know how to help their children, especially when you're talking about math, right? Math can be very challenging, but not just math. I mean, science, chemistry, physics, okay, never mind, right? Like you start getting into some of those, it's a challenge. Or even for some of our elementary families, I'm just going to put out a shout out to you. I understand that, math, the way we teach math in school now does not look the same way as it looked when you were in school, and I understand that. So again, very important that our students have access to trying that homework and starting that homework while in there so they can ask questions. And then also number 4 is talking about that time part, Trustee Cassioppo, that teachers should collaborate with other teachers in giving homework assignments. So what we also find is that, especially when you get into the secondary world, right, middle school or high school, and the kids have 6 or 7 teachers, if the teachers are not collaborating with each other, then you might have 3 tests on the same day, or 3 papers due on the same day, right? So this is really a statement to say, we believe that teachers should be collaborating with each other so that we are not unintentionally loading students down with big assignments due at the same time or tests on the same time. So that hopefully gets to some of that. So you don't have a student who one day has only 10 minutes of homework and then the next day has 5 hours of homework, right? So trying to put some balance to that. And then on the next page, page 2, again, number 5 is existing in our current regulation that homework should never be assigned as a disciplinary measure. And we specifically added to that about those tasks. So tasks such as covering books, securing parent signatures, checking grades, et cetera, should never be graded. Again, that's one of those equity type issues. If you have a family where parents are working and not home in the evenings when the student's home, and then a teacher is giving a kid an assignment from having the parent sign some kind of grade check, that is really an unfair activity to expect to happen in that home versus, in my home, because I'm an educator and I was always home after school to check my kids' homework. So that is why those things should be, we do believe those are important things, and we do want to not discourage those types of activities. It's just they shouldn't be graded. They're a task. It's not a grading, it's not homework. And then number 6, homework should not create inequity or otherwise cause a disadvantage to students' learning success due to time or resources available. And that specifically is what we were getting to, Trustee Varner. I mean, in terms of really, we have to understand in this day and age, and we know in this day and age, that we have kids coming from very different backgrounds. They all have different things that they're dealing with within their environments. And understanding that why we think homework is very important, and we do. Understanding that we have to take into account students' unique situations and not let that be the barrier to them in terms of their success in school. So how do we work around that? How do we provide them supports and resources to help them be successful in home? And then number 7 and 8 are new, but number 7 specifically is to address the fact that we do need that the frequency and length of assignments may vary according to individual needs and complexity of curriculum, and then accommodations need to be made for students who require LEP services or special ed or 504, et cetera. So, in a math class, if the typical homework assignment is to give 20 problems and you have a student who has a learning disability and therefore processes more slowly, that is usually written in IEP, so it works. But when you come up with an LEP student, sometimes it's not written in there. And you might have a student with limited English proficiency who has difficulty accessing the curriculum because of the language barrier. So taking that into mind, we still want to challenge that student to do well and access it, but that student might need a little more time, a little less work to do to be able to really fully complete that work. And then number 8, at the secondary level, homework grading procedures should be defined at the beginning of the course and communicated to students and parents, and at the elementary, homework expectations should be consistent within each grade level and communicated to parents and students at the beginning of the year. We thought it was important to put a statement in this regulation about the communication expectation. So in secondary classes, typically every course sends home a course syllabus, course expectation sheet, letting parents know what the expectations are. One of the things that we've always held firm at Carson High School, and I know our other principals has as well, is that if we make a change to that class at any point in time, that parents have to be informed and follow-up communication to go home. So that's why that's an important piece. And then also, we want things to be consistent at each level. So for instance, if you're at Borderwick Bray and you're in first grade, we expect all first grade teachers to have a common policy when it comes to homework, right? That you don't have teacher A who says, I'm going to give you half hour of homework a night, or teacher B that says you don't get any homework. And the same thing goes up at the high school and at the middle school. So for instance, we do expect all Algebra 1 teachers to have the same policy with regards to homework. So just that consistency across the board. And that helps. Mr. Walker, I'm sure, can personally relate to this, that it's frustrating when we have a parent, for instance, who finds out, my daughter has this teacher for algebra. My daughter's best friend has this teacher for algebra. My daughter comes home with an hour and a half of homework a night. My daughter's friend comes home with no homework a night. So how is that? And then everybody wants to go to the no homework a night parent or to teacher. Unfortunately, we wish they'd go the other way, but they never go the other way. They want to go to the no homework teacher. But so just making sure that our teachers are staying on the same page with those expectations.
With that thought, do the principals feel that they had adequate time in the schedule to allow that collaboration to take place before school?
Well, those are some of the topics that we talk about on our early release days. So we currently, again, a little off topic, but to answer your question.
Well, I'm just, because it's saying like in the beginning of the year, so I'm just saying that they're going to need a little bit of time when we return before school to kind of get a program in place, right?
I think these things are actually in practice. They're not in writing. So from our administrators, these are common things that they do already. They just wanted to have it captured and noted and be able to provide that guidance to teachers to support and say, here's expectations, and it does fall in line with the board policy. And then during our
Parents too.
Right, absolutely. And then during our early release days, like I said, we do allow, and that's one of the activities that our teachers do that maybe our families aren't aware of, right, is they do talk about curriculum pacing, they talk about common practices within their classrooms, and common ways to address those things. So is typically where that's taking place. And then this is a little different because now we added, it seemed to us within our team that everything was laying on the shoulders of the teachers, right? And we're like, well, that's really not fair. We think other people should have responsibilities too. So we came up with some responsibilities for administrators. So that's part B here. And then on part B, number 1, basically talks about the communication, again, through the student handbook. So either Peaches at the elementary, student handbooks at the secondary, and that we think it should be posted on the individual school websites. So what are the beliefs and what are the guiding policies for each of the schools? We also believe, number 2, that we do need to provide our teachers professional learning to develop quality instructional practice around the use of homework, right? Everyone assumes that teachers understand that homework, what it should look like, and that it should be just to enforce what's going on in the classroom. But how many of our teachers will actually tell you that they never discuss that? You go to teacher school and they don't really talk about that, right? That's not something you just kind of do what you did when you were in school. So really giving our teachers an opportunity to talk about those things and come up with those policies and processes in their early release days and their professional learning days. And then number 3, effectively using and applying homework must be monitored in the school and in individual classrooms. So we're saying it's the administrator's responsibility to work with those teachers to make sure that they're actually doing what we're asking them to do. And again, paying special attention to IEPs and LEP student needs, and leadership and coaching provided through thoughtful planning discussions during PLC meetings and professional learning days activities. And number 4 is information regarding the homework help programs and tutoring for any student who requires instructional support should be provided to parents. So we have a lot of resources in our district, and again, it's about that communication piece, right? So that's the administrator's job, is actually to also make sure that our parents understand if your child is having a hard time learning and not completing homework, here's how we as a school can help you. Here's how you can access Khan Academy to get some extra support. Here's the other resources that we can make sure that you have access to. And then we did put in some responsibilities for parents and guardians as well.
Before we move on, if I could, having written numerous policies throughout my career, whenever I would put should in a sentence, it always seemed like it left some kind of leeway for the people to come back and say, well, you said I should do it, but you didn't say I had to do it. And so I'm wondering if maybe the should be will or shall, because it just leaves that little gray area.
Absolutely. And then in C, students and parents and guardians, again, this was just our team kind of brainstorming, well, what is the responsibility of parents and students? So a quiet place to complete work should be established and time should be set aside and devoted each night to complete homework assignments. So if our families would help us with that, because that's another thing parents often say, that was the feedback from parents, I can't help my child with homework. Yes, you can. How can you help your child? You can make sure they have a place to do your homework, you can make sure it's quiet, and you can make sure that they have resources that if they don't know how to do it, you know how to log into Khan Academy, right? Or to how to get homework help. So that's a great way for a parent to help a student. We also, number 2, state that parents are encouraged to consult students' teacher and or counselor if they observe either excessive time being spent on homework or if they have questions concerning specific homework assignments. So we often hear in parent-teacher conferences, my kid comes home and does 5 hours of homework. We hear that a lot. But I think what happens most of the time when we dive deeper into that, it's because the parent sees the student sitting at the table for 5 hours, not getting work done. But then we talk to the student and say, well, what did you do for 5 hours? Because it was literally 10 problems. And they're like, well, I was texting my friend and I was watching videos and I was doing, you know what I mean? So.
And sometimes it's not that.
Sometimes it's not.
Sometimes it's kids don't have the executive function to actually figure out how to stay focused on it. So you can have an assignment that would take, when they're focused, takes them 5 minutes. When they're not, or if they're irritable, you can fight them for an hour and a half. So it just depends. So I don't know.
They all irritable doing homework?
Not always, not always. I will say that. But I think that's something where we need to make sure parents can talk to teachers about that, because sometimes kids don't understand, particularly elementary kids. A lot of times they're not on their phones. They're sitting there daydreaming about riding their bikes or doing something else. So
absolutely. That's why we're encouraging parents to reach out, because we want to get to the underlying issue, right? So is it that maybe the student's phone needs to be taken away and put to the side so I can focus on this instead of social media? Or is it that I'm really not understanding my homework and it's so far above my head that I can't focus on it? Or is it that I'm having some difficulty with executive functioning and maybe need some support in how to prioritize what I'm doing? I mean, there's all different reasons. But then again, the reason why we're saying to families, we don't want you to come into a parent conference frustrated in February because your student has been spending 5-6 hours a night. Reach out earlier than that. Let us help problem solve what's going on and figure out how we can support that student.
And I think that probably lends itself to that time recommendations that we have further in the policy here, because really if it's taking a second grader 2 hours to do their homework, well, after the 20 minutes, it's time to close the book and talk to the teacher the next day.
Absolutely.
They shouldn't be sitting there for an hour,
Absolutely. And then on page 3, we just continued on, again, for parents, just to say, we encourage you to review your students' homework for completion, right? And offer support if necessary. So if you don't know how to do the trig, that's okay, right? If you don't know how to do the physics, or if you don't know how to do the 3rd grade math, because it doesn't look the same way it did when you were there, that's okay. But can you review it? Can you look at it? Can you talk to your child about it if it's not completed? And then 4, students should be encouraged to pursue non-assigned independent leisure reading. It was funny. Mr. Wallace from OCA said, Tasha, this seems like a really random statement. I said, I know, but our teachers were super, super, super concerned and felt that it had to be noted somewhere in here that students needed to be encouraged to continue non-assigned independent leisure reading, trying to build a world of readers and kids who love reading. And so instead of them always seeing as, well, I don't have homework because, my teacher didn't tell me I had to read for 10 minutes, that we really want them to read, no matter what it is, whether it is a magazine that they find interesting, whether it is, a blog, something that they're interested in, something that they can pursue, that kind of thing. So the teachers were passionate about it, and I said, if you're passionate about it, then I will put it in there and we'll see if it flies. But that's the reason why that seems a little odd and out of place. It's because teachers were passionate about it.
And I think that anything that we can do to get the student interested in reading, he's gonna, whatever helps. So I agree with that. I think it's
I
great.
agree with that statement too.
Very good, thank you. This Roman numeral 2, so this is part of the research that we did. So Harrison Cooper of Duke University came up with this 10-minute rule. I felt it was important to put that in there because it's in essence, word for word, his work. So that's why we actually put that in there. So I want you to know that. And basically, it just means 10 minutes per grade level. So kindergarten, 10 minutes, first grade, 10 to 15, second grade, 20, third grade, 30, etc. So even up through the middle school, so sixth grade, 60 minutes, seventh grade, 70 minutes, eighth grade, 80 minutes. Now, when it gets into high school, it changes, you can see, and that's because it really depends on what student path they're on. If you are in an honors or an AP course, it is really going to be significantly higher. And there's no way around that because we are preparing them to go to college. And I'm going to tell you, my daughter's taking biochemistry right now in a summer class, and the summer class meets 2 hours a day. And her professor told her told the entire class that they should be spending at least 5 hours a day outside of class time on homework. So she just said to me, that means that's 7 hours a day. Like, that's a full-time job to take this biochem class. And she was blowing it off at first until she got her first test score and ended up with a 59% on it. And then now she's spending 7 hours a day because she said, there's no way I'm spending 7 hours a day on this. And so after that first test score came out, she went, I'm spending 7 hours a day on this because otherwise I'm going to retake this class.
Is
So-
she taking any other classes though? Because I understand the need to do that with those higher advanced classes, but when you start looking at 6 to 10 hours of homework, if that was per class in high school, they're already in school from right before 8 till 2 o'clock. So you've got 6 hours a day.
So that's per week, not per day.
Yeah, but 6 to 10 hours per week on top of their already 6 hours a day. But if that's per class, if each class in the high school thinks, oh, I can give them 6 to 10 hours a week, that can easily become more than a full-time job. And you have kids that are working or doing athletics as well. So I think there needs to be.
Well, it says for all courses combined. So we did specifically put that. So it should be 6 to 10 hours a week, homework per week for all courses combined. So again, no, you're fine. And that's why we said on that first page, you know what I mean, that it's important for teachers to collaborate. But I just, again, want to put it out there for families. Again, we're trying to, so we also scaffold that up in the high school level. Ninth grade amount of homework looks different than a junior or senior. And I'm sure those of you who have juniors at home know that year is actually more grueling than the senior year in terms of what the students' belief, because it really kicks it in gear that year. But this is the very specific reason why. I mean.
And I think that probably when I like listening to Richard's points and Laurel's points, and they're very valid. And I think that when we look at the economic crisis and the impact it's having on families, there's going to be a lot of teenagers who are working next year because the family needs that money to, maintain. And so I think that our schools are also going to have to be really open-minded with that and work with some of these kiddos, because there's going to be some people that literally don't have time to do 6 to 10 hours a night of homework, and they might have to do it on the weekends or the breaks. And so I think that we can have a policy, but I think that the human side of it has to weigh in also.
Absolutely. And again, this was our attempt to somewhat limit. So exactly what you're saying, Trustee Crossman, this is exactly what our parents said, is like, oh my goodness, my kid is taking these 4 or 5 AP courses, or even with our Jump Start program, Mr. Casiopo and Trustee Casiopo and Trustee Ramirez knows this, that the students that are in our Jump Start program are doing just hours and hours of homework.
That's pretty standard for a full-time college student. We ask them to consider setting aside 24 hours per week for homework. And that's the only way they're going to be successful. So it's, this is preparing the students, literally preparing the students to think ahead and to be ready for college.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, but you're exactly right, Tasha. And in fact, we were talking about it today with Mrs. Chambers, and we were telling students how basically every hour in class for Jumpstart equals 3 hours of homework. And some kids get through it quicker, some don't, but it's a higher level of commitment. And, you know, my daughter was doing homework till wee hours of the night sometimes because she did have an outside schedule, extracurricular schedule. And it's a tough balance, I get it, but I think we gotta, you know, we have to have a guide and a balance. And I think this does provide a good, you know, idea of this is what it takes. And it gives teachers a sense of, like you said, Tasha, let's work together to make sure we don't inadvertently cause a kid to have to study for 3 exams on one evening. So I think, you know, I think this works. It's not ideal for everybody, but, you know, we got to have something in place.
And I think that probably, Joe, what you're saying, and then also we're asking parents to let the school or the counselor know if this has taken more than the recommended time, because those kids who need resources, that's going to help us identify those kids. And I mean, I think we want to have rigorous academics in our schools. We certainly want to prepare our kids to lead our community in the future. I know we're all depending on that, having smart people in charge of our communities. So I think that it is a balancing act.
And I'll tell you, I think one thing we're so fortunate about in our district, and I appreciated this from the day that I came to our district as a principal of Carson High School, is that we do allow our students to take honors or AP courses. So for instance, what I mean by that is, in my previous district, if you offered AP English in the junior year, you were not permitted to offer honors English. You could not have both honors and AP. It was you could have regular and honors, no AP, or regular and AP, no. And I'm not sure what the reason was for that, but that is a practice in one of our neighboring districts. And to me, that was always a hardship, because for our students, we want them to take the most rigorous classes that they can handle. We don't want any student to be overwhelmed and overloaded, and we certainly don't want students just breaking down because they've been so overwhelmed. But having those 3 levels of classes really does allow students to pick and choose where they feel their strengths are and where they feel that maybe they don't want to quite challenge themselves yet in that particular area, and kind of pick anywhere and all over the place to do that. And I think that's so important, because again, I get my oldest 2, my youngest, of course, graduated from Carson High School, go Senators, but my younger 2 did not. They graduated in a different district, and I'm going to use my middle one as an example. He took honors English in 9th and 10th grade because there was no AP classes in 9th and 10th grade. So he took honors, they had honors, but by the time he got to his junior year, they didn't have honors, they only had AP, so he had to take regular AP. Well, he was a math science kid. That was his forte, that was his strength. English was not his strength. So then he chose to take the AP classes in math and science and took a regular English class. Here's an interesting thing. This is one of my college students who's gonna graduate in May. A year from now. He's an English major and is actually dual credit or dual major in English and economics. So even though it was not his area of strength, he ended up majoring in that, and that was because he had a fantastic remedial English teacher in college, because he ended up in remedial English after having taken regular English in junior and senior year. So again, it's one thing that we have to be able to offer to our families, which is a wonderful thing, because it does help then, Trustee Crossman, our kids hopefully are picking schedules that help them balance that need, right? So we don't want students overwhelmed and doing 10 hours a night of homework, but we do want them to challenge them to take the most rigorous classes they feel they can handle and that are going to prepare them for college and careers. So we're a fortunate district and we have wonderful teachers. So my daughter did not end up taking remedial English. As a matter of fact, she skipped 101 thanks to Mr. Macy and went right into 102. So you go, Mr. Macy. So the rest part of, yes.
If I could, I have a question. I understand the concept of preparing children to go to college and the homework and everything they're going to face there. But I think somewhere along the way, I've read different studies that didn't show a great value of homework in the elementary school levels. Has there been any research done to that, if the kids are more successful if they have homework in the elementary schools versus no homework?
I'm glad you asked that question. Yes, we did do some research on that, and I actually brought a couple of the articles that we read just as an example. And the takeaway from our research that we found is that it's not necessarily that homework itself in elementary school boosts their academic level, but what it does is it helps them start to create those or work on those executive functioning skills, right? So being able to organize their time, being able to structure time, being able to put those skills of how to be a good student into practice. So it's more about that at the younger levels than necessarily academic improvement. And it was also found that many schools who have students who maybe have high poverty schools or schools with high LEP populations often adopt a no homework policy. And in reality, the research is showing that that has actually lowered the achievement scores of those schools versus schools who've said, we recognize that we have students that have individual challenges at home and that we're still going to put that expectation and we're still going to provide support to our students so they can meet that expectation. We're not lowering our expectations. They excelled more. So in reality, it depends on how you look at that research, right? So just the act of assigning homework, is that going to make kids, is that going to elevate them in terms of their academics? No. Is it going to help them learn those skills to, again, time management, organization, structure, and then support those lifelong work habits? Absolutely. And in the long run, they actually get further ahead, according to the research.
When I think about it, we have a lot of great teachers in this district, and we certainly don't want to tie their hands. We want to give them guidance. We want to give them the resources they need to do their jobs and be successful. And I think this policy, as I read it, personally, I have a lot of different opinions on homework, and my views on homework at the high school level is very different than at an elementary level. But it's not about me. It's about what the teacher is doing in that classroom to support those kids and what those kids need. I mean, there are different kids with different competencies and interests, and it's a hard enough job to kind of keep all those kids interested in moving forward. And so I think that as long as our policy is kind of laying out something that's fair for our kids, giving our teachers the guidance and the freedom to kind of navigate what they need to do to meet the needs of the students within the scope of our standards, I think that that's great. I mean, I don't want to be too prescriptive at the board level, because then we might be undercutting what our teachers are doing.
So then I also added in Roman numeral 3 on summer assignments, and so this is now not part of the research that they did. This was simply coming from Carson High School and also being a high school principal in another school. Summer assignments are always a question, and we try to provide our teachers some guidelines, but I thought it would be important for us to acknowledge as a board and as a district those guidelines. And first and foremost, we don't ever want summer assignments to be a barrier to accessing honors and AP level courses. And nor do we want it to be a situation where a student who, and this is what happens every year, and it was at both of the schools I was a principal at, a student did not complete the AP summer assignment, so a week into the school year, or the first day in the school year, the student's asking to drop the class. Well, I challenge my teachers all the time to say, what college course do you ever take in your entire existence that gave you a summer assignment to complete before you entered the first day of school? Like none. Right? I have 3 degrees. Not one of my classes ever gave me assignments to do prior to walking to the front first day of school. That being said, I don't think summer assignments are a bad thing. I'm not opposed to summer assignments. I'm not. I just don't think they should be the gatekeeper for kids. So we had a big conversation at Carson High School around this, right? So around what our belief statements are, around what we believe. So this is where we came up with the summer assignments guidelines here. So again, I want to, and typically what happens, just so you know, the genesis of the summer assignment is our AP teachers often find it difficult to cover the amount of material that needs to be covered in the time frame that it has to be covered in for tests to be the first 2 weeks of May. I mean, testing is early. That means that they are having to finish basically a month before the other classes. So they'd like to get a jump start on things like reading this novel or doing that so that we can hit the first day of school running, right? We don't have to wait 2 weeks in for people to read this novel. Or in the case of AP chemistry, Mr. Quartermeyer always said to me, they have to really be able to know that periodic table, right, front, left, back, right. I can't wait until a month in for them to have that memorized. They need to have that memorized. And I respect that. But we also then need to make accommodations for kids who weren't able to do that, right? So saying that this is our expectation, this is what we're going to give you in this assignment, that's fine. But if you were not able to complete it, we have to give you time to catch up. And if you're an AP or honors level kid, you're going to catch up, right? We don't want you dropping out before you even had a chance to do that. So that's where those summer assignment guidelines came from.
Any other questions or discussions? Richard, go ahead.
I just have a comment that I'd like to acknowledge the teachers who are assigning homework, because I know when they do, most of the time they're spending their own time to look at it, grade it, assess it. I've experienced that firsthand. And so I just want to acknowledge the teachers, and because I know a lot of it's on their own time.
Just a question, did you discuss anything in the regulation about late turn-ins of homework? Just because it's something that some kids struggle with, and I understand the importance of teaching deadlines, but also, is it better to do the work rather than if it's late and you don't accept anything, then the kids don't do the work and they're not doing that learning? So was that something that you discussed and thought about putting in there, but decided
discuss
against
that.
it?
Absolutely, we did discuss that. The principals did have discussions around that too. Each individual school should be also putting that information in their handbooks or in the course syllabi. And again, the reason why those become a challenge to do is because, again, obviously my experience, firsthand experiences with the high school. We have very different expectations for a ninth grader in terms of late work than we do a senior. And those expectations are scaffolded up each year. And we know our ninth graders come in and it's pretty much, well, if you can get it in before the end of before the unit assessment, we're happy, right? By the time you get to be a senior, it's like, no, if it's not in when it's due, guess what? You're losing points, because if you don't do your job on time, you're going to be docked day of pay, that kind of thing. So teachers are asked at our respective sites to have those conversations and to have joint, again, expectations across same subject classes. So first grade teachers to have same policy, third grade teachers to have same, high school U.S. history teachers to have the same policy. So we did have those discussions, and we have provided at the secondary level, like suggested considerations for a course syllabus to go home that has that expectation for common policies. But in particular, in terms of putting it in here, you would probably add another 3 or 4 pages if you tried to break it down by grade level, talk about it being scaffolded, you know what I mean, that kind of thing. And then it also depends on whether it's a regular class, an honors class, or an AP course too. You're also looking at those differing expectations based on level of course. And especially when it comes to some of our dual credit classes, because we use the college's expectations when it comes to those classes. We follow the policies of the college.
And I was going to say, if the idea is to prepare the students to go to college and to start learning what expectations, they're going to have from their college instructors, I think we are really teaching them that they need to start turning in their homework on time, because that is a real huge struggle with many students when they first start college. Mm-hmm. So if we can catch that in advance and teach them properly, since the beginning of their high school years, they'll be better off. So.
All right. Thank you. I mean, the hard work is evident in that document, so grading and homework are controversial. You could get 10 educators in a room and have 10 different philosophies and opinions. So I know it was probably a real challenge to get all those levels coalesced into one document. So nice job.
Thank you. I'd have to say, I don't think anyone is actually loving this. It was just everything was like, I can live with that. I can live with that. Okay, we can live with that. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Plus, we appreciate all the time they took to put it in there. I mean, it's really detailed, but it's to a point where we can understand it. It's not a lot of educational lingo too, so we do appreciate that. The only other thing I would put is at the beginning, just for consistency maybe, is that the Carson City School District Board of Trustees believes.
Thank you.
Any other
Yeah,
discussion?
Tasha.
Go ahead, Joe.
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
Good.
I just wanted to say, Tasha, I appreciate the effort that went into this. I think it is a well thought out regulation, and I agree a lot went into it. So my thanks to you and everybody involved.
Thank you.
All right, moving along, we have discussion of the Nevada Association of School Boards nominations to be considered for recognition during the 2020 annual conference. This is for discussion only. And so one of the things we always kind of coordinate and start identifying potential candidates that we want to nominate for these awards. And so, believe it or not, it's June and it's time for us to start thinking about this stuff. And so,
And Deb moved up the deadline to July 31st. It's no longer August 15th.
we're going to need to
So-
have a talk with her.
Just for,
Because I was just going to say, who's going to help get these done before August? So, started with, Mr. Stokes and I kind of brainstormed a little bit yesterday, and then we certainly wanted to get the feedback of the trustees and see other thoughts. School Administrator of the Year, one of the things that I thought would be important, I think it's important to start recognizing some of our junior administrators also, not just always the principals. And so we're able to nominate 2 people. And so part of the discussion was to nominate a principal and assistant principal or a dean to go along with that. So Mr. Stokes had recommended Mrs. Zona for outstanding academics at Sealiger Elementary School. I think we both were in agreement with that. And then we started talking about somebody who's had long tenure in the district and does really good work, Sue Molden. And so that was another person that we had discussed, but we certainly wanted to see if there were any other administrators in the ranks that you all are recommending.
I just think it's been a difficult year for us to even, those of us that aren't involved in the system
Mm-hmm.
as much and don't have kids in the system, to really evaluate any of that. So I would be, going with whatever you guys decided, unless there's people in the public, that will come and let us know what great things are going on with the teachers and the administrators would be nice to know too.
And I think that was, exactly what you said as part of what our conversation was. Right now, there's a lot of unsung heroes out there that have been doing all kinds of things for families behind the scenes. And so certainly we're trying to identify that, but with our limited view, because most teachers just do it because that's what they view as their job. So we had last year for school district employee making a difference, we nominated Miriam Torres and Carrie Pryor. And I think one or both of those would be great people to renominate. We also discussed, we have a lot of nutrition people that have been really going above and beyond since school closures. One of the people we talked about was Bev Heath, who has served the district a long time, truly cares about these kids and the schools. And so that was another person we had discussed. You, Lupe?
I would also like to consider nominating Leticia Servini. She really goes above and beyond. And it seems like every Latino family that I speak with, Leticia helped us. So I feel that she definitely goes above and beyond to try to serve all families as much as possible.
Okay. And I think we all agree with that. We've all probably been at meetings with Leticia. And so what do we think about Leticia and maybe Bev?
I'm okay with that.
I mean, when you really look at these times, our nutrition services employees they were truly on the front lines. So when this was real scary, when it first started, I mean, they were the ones out there providing meals every day to kids and smiling and reassuring them. So I think that's huge.
In the freezing cold at the
Yeah.
beginning. That was incredible.
Are we
Yeah,
talking, I'm sorry, Letitia, for school district employee making a difference?
Yeah,
Okay.
both of them. Joe, did you have something to add?
No, I agree with that. I like those choices.
Okay. District level impact, administrator impacting student achievement. Last year, we nominated Mr. Fueling and Paul Johnson, and obviously they both won that award. So at this point, I think Mr. Stokes and I had a discussion. We didn't really settle on specific people for this one, but is there any district level administrator? Some of the names we talked about was Dan Davis and kind of his work communicating different things. Oh, actually, Dan was for another one of the awards. Dan was a different award. Mr. Stokes, I don't remember. We talked about several people. We didn't settle on anyone.
And Mr. President, since our conversation, I've had a couple of other names just that I think are certainly valid. One would be Valerie Dockery. I don't think she's ever been recognized, and she has worked to help the district receive billions of dollars, essentially. You're right, she's also been part of bringing GATE to our district in a big way. She works on the foundation. She works on the school-based health center. She's got her hands in a lot of special projects per her title. But
Well, and as someone who's
she
reviewed
deals
her
with everyone
grants,
with a great
she
deal
does a
of
good job.
interest. Yeah.
I think I would agree with that. Okay.
I'd agree with it also.
Yeah, me too.
So NASB Director of the Year, last year we nominated Don Miller from Story County. And obviously we could nominate any other districts or in our district. I mean, I think Don
No, I
does a
don't
good
think
job.
we like our director. Our director's flaky.
I'm not sure our director likes you much, Stacy.
I think the other director that, just because it's this year, I was thinking Chris from Humboldt, because he worked so hard. He worked really hard on the executive director's evaluation. He came up with template after template and did a lot of work that none of us on that committee would have ever attempted. And it made it so much easier to get the evaluation done because we'd never had one. So it was something, we actually had a form to fill out and guidelines, and I thought he went above and beyond being a director.
I think we could do that. I mean, I obviously wasn't on that committee, but I don't think it'd be a bad thing to nominate Dawn again. She serves on the state board on, representing school districts, and she's big proponents for teachers in rural school districts, and so I think either one of those would be fine, like personally speaking. Yeah.
The other thing, you haven't gone through and told who's writing what either yet, Mr. President.
Those are all assigned to you, Trustee Wilkie. We'll get that after we get the names done. So
We could do both, because there is no, looking at the form, there is nothing that says we can't do 2 or 3 or 4.
okay, so why don't we do both? I don't remember. And it wasn't Story either. It wasn't either one of them. So I mean, I think we could do both. So, Veteran School Board Member of the Year, last year we nominated Joe.
That's another one where White Pine is asked about, and so they're nominating 3 people. So if we want to nominate everybody that's in there, what, their second term is for that one?
Is that
Who've
what you want
served
to do?
more than 1 term, so that would be,
You, Laurel, and Joe.
no, that would be, Don, you're on your second term, aren't you?
Not officially, I was appointed and then just one.
Okay, so it would be Joe and Laurel.
So the 3 of us, okay.
And then new School Board Member of the Year. So last year, we nominated me for that. And I did win, so thank you for the recognition. I was thinking, I was thinking of Lupe and the work that she's been doing in our community with our high school and our parents and kind of bringing some outreach to the school board. And I think that that's all really commendable. And I think that she'd be a great representative for that award.
Yeah, I like that idea. Lupe, she does a lot at a couple different levels, so I think she'd be, aside from getting my vote, she'd be a strong candidate.
And I think Richard would be too. I think we
Okay.
could do 2 there.
Yeah.
I think we've got 2 really impressive. You guys came in and you started, Richard's been on a lot of committees and put in a lot of times in a lot of different areas. So I think as long as we can do both, I think we should.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have no issue with that. I think they're both great trustees to have.
All right, individual school board member of the year last year. I don't know who we nominated last year, but she did win.
I did.
So,
So it was really skewed voting because you and I both won. That makes us wonder. And AJ. Whew. That would probably have to be somebody from another county because I'm the only one that qualifies this year. Next year we'll have 2. But I don't know if anybody from any other counties is thinking, I don't know, Joe's in his last term. He's done it this year. Wade. Glenda's in her last year. So we could think about that one.
okay,
And
so
really,
we could come back to that one.
yeah, give that one some.
School board of the year. So this is one that we won school board of the year last year, and I think it was either the year or the year before that, or even one prior to that. We were the governance board of the year.
Year before, back to back.
So, I mean, I don't know if we want to nominate ourselves for that or if we want to recognize our colleagues. I think that
I think we should recognize colleagues.
I'm fine with that as well. So who would we want to recognize for school board of the year?
One that Lander had 4 new people come on. And I think they've done a really good job, but I don't know how they've done in the year,
I
so.
was gonna say, well, that one's gonna be all on you two, because I don't know anything about it. I mean, I think we should stick with, I don't know.
And we don't have to nominate everybody in every category either. It just depends on what the board feels.
I mean, I think that's another one we could kind of look at. I mean, we're gonna have to research.
Yeah.
I don't know if any of us are following
So-
the other school boards, really.
So you and I can
Right.
research that one with the meetings that we have and come back with some recommendations on that one and the
In governance?
governance.
Okay.
I'm not sure. There's underlying issues at other boards too that we don't know of either that we should
Right.
research before so we'll work on that one.
Okay, I'm okay with that. Does anybody have any opposition to them doing a little research? Okay. Superintendent of the year, last year we nominated Terry White from Douglas County, and she won. And Mr. Stokes has respectfully bowed out of contention. So we were thinking of Wayne Workman is the president of the Superintendent's Association and has been doing a lot of work for the state with the closures and working with the NDE. And so we were thinking of nominating him if that's,
I have another nominee to put in there is Dale Norton.
yeah.
He's been real active on NAAA and worked well with a couple of the other counties, getting resources for them.
Did he just win it? I feel like. Yeah, he
Oh,
just
did
won
he?
it.
Okay. Then we're good.
All right, so individual friend of K-12 public education, we nominated Fund Our Future last year.
Mr. Walker, I have a couple of thoughts
Okay.
along those lines. One would be Tim Milliken from Capital Ford. He has done a tremendous amount of fundraising over the years for Carson City schools, especially at the high school level. Drive One for Your School, you may be familiar with that.
Yeah.
Sheriff Furlong has been a great friend of the school district. And then from the Carson City Schools Foundation, not many people know this, but we have some benefactors who no longer live in the community. One actually passed away recently that have donated almost $100,000 to the foundation. That's Beverly Wolf and Robert Betts. They certainly have, their money has been used for the many grants that you see given through the foundation. So there are some very deserving individuals out there that have benefited the school district in one way or another.
It might be a nice way to honor their memory to nominate them, I think. Is anybody opposed to doing that?
No, and there's not a reason we can't nominate two either there. There's no restriction.
Yeah, I'd like to
Living or?
think about Mr. Milligan.
Yeah.
He has done a lot. And I think he'll continue to do a lot.
So are Beverly Wolf and Robert Betts one entity? Like, is that a couple or two separate people?
No, they're a couple, so I would say they would be honored as a couple together.
We could do Tim and them. Okay. I think that'd be nice. Last year for Media Award in Online Journalism, we nominated Carson Now. That's what Mr. Stokes and I were thinking we could nominate Dan Davis for, just his outreach and communication with families. Is there any other suggestions for that one?
Online
for
media.
No, that was for Media Award in Online Journalism. Yeah. I'm looking at the board notes. And then for Media Award in Print Journalism, Jessica, what's her last name?
Garcia.
Garcia, we talked about nominating her.
Definitely.
So it sounds like several on the same page with that. Local Governance Team of the Year, you guys are looking into that. I think it's a no-brainer that Board Secretary or Administrative Assistant of the Year, Renee Cortez, the quietest sneeze in the state. And then we have the Innovative Teacher Awards. And that's what we that was another one we talked about, several people. We didn't really settle in on any, and I think we might want to continue looking into that. Last year, we nominated Bonnie Benson and Ananda Campbell. And yeah. And I think, wasn't there somebody else? I think we might have. I feel like there was somebody else. Ski, he did for students with special needs, right? Yeah. It could have been.
Did a lot with during the online distance learning. She had some real innovative stuff that she did. I was
Bonnie's a
pretty
super
impressed.
teacher. She's phenomenal. Ananda's phenomenal. I think we have a lot
We
of
have
great
way
people.
too many.
We have a lot of great people. So I think that,
I had a son in Bonnie's class this year, and those kids, when it went to remote learning, even before the first week with the packet, she was giving, hey, here's what you can do. Here's how you can stay on top of it. When things couldn't figure out, she was just problem solving, fixing, just really kept them engaged. And I think for innovation, I think it was amazing.
so we have Bonnie. What about thinking of somebody secondary for the second nomination? So middle school and above, and then we have an elementary teacher and, oh, you can only do one? Okay, so are we in agreement to nominate Bonnie?
I'm in agreement.
Yes.
All right, so I think,
Just another thought I had on the individual friends to education. Officer Davis, isn't that her name? Who taught there for so many years. I don't know if that would be. Yeah. Yeah. So. Anyway, that's.
well, I think,
I also read that it says who's impacted, particularly during session years, so that, I'm not sure.
She might be one that we want to recognize as a board too, because of her dedication and the difference that she's made in our district. That might be something to look at as another
I think
way to
that's a
do
great
it.
idea, because I
I
know
really
she's
do,
impacted
too.
a lot of students.
I'm thinking because of the way this is written on what they're looking for, she might not fit within that category.
that's what I was gonna say, because that's part of her job, whereas people donating funds for the foundation and fundraising for the high school, you know what I mean? That's in addition. I think that's. All right, so I think that probably what we'll do is, I'll work with Mr. Stokes, and some of these people we probably have some documentation together for, and then we'll kind of farm it out once we figure out what we need. If that's agreeable, unless anybody's jumping up and down right now and they want an assignment, we can give you a couple that are right. Okay.
I may be able to get some information on Letitia,
Okay, perfect.
because my wife, I think, works with her. Well, that'd be great, and then I know Nancy would be glad to put some input in.
Letitia's president, she's been president of the PTA at Carson High as well, so that's great.
All right, moving on to number 14, approval of the consent agenda. This is for possible action.
Yeah, I'll read that. I move that the Carson City School District Board of Trustees approve the consent agenda as submitted.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Joe, second by Stacy. Any discussion by the board? Seeing none, any public comment?
Seeing none?
All right, we have an indication that there's no email public comment either. So I'll call a question. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Item number 15, informational items. This is for discussion only. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Stokes about any of the informational items? Seeing none. Item 16, request for future agenda topics.
Just the one they said prior with Linda Davis, or
Okay.
Mrs. Davis. Just her recognition of her, Lisa. It's after 9.
I worked with her for a lot of times, and I call her Linda a lot too, but I always remember it. Is it Lisa or is it Linda? Okay, anything else?
Yeah, if I could, I know we recognize the employees who are retiring or leaving the district for whatever reason, but I'd just like to give a little extra recognition to Linda Hersel, Barb Martin. You know, they've been here for 30 years, and they have done a terrific job. And, you know, I've been friends with them for a lot of years, and I just think they've gone above and beyond. And so I'd just like to give a little extra shout out to them.
Certainly.
And we recognize Linda on the nutrition committee when, at the end of that, to tell her, because she was so involved in that and other projects, so we let her know that.
Yeah, I know she's been involved in a lot of different things over the years, and her focus has always been on what's best for the kids over her whole career.
So, Mr.
Yeah, I
Switz, one
agree.
thing we might want to think about for future agenda, we talked about doing some kind of reception for the Teachers of the Year. I think obviously we're waiting for a little bit more guidance from the governor, but that might just be a little bit later in the summer. But that's something I want to make sure we don't let drop off, because we did plan on recognizing them. I think that there's a lot of things we haven't been able to do this year like we'd like to, so. Yeah. Laurel's gonna plan a drive-by recognition. All right. The next item is public comment, nope, adjournment. Okay, we will adjourn at 9:55.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Goodbye.